The murder of Brenda Thurman on a cold January morning in 2016 began when an ambulance brought former military sniper Brenda to the hospital. She became the victim of a tragic accident. However, just a week later, when a colleague of Brenda was found dead, certain suspicions arose about whether there was a direct connection between these two unexpected deaths. Around 9 a.m. on January 18, 2016, in Spokane, Washington, Gabrielle, the adult daughter of Brenda and Dwayne Thurman, was on the top floor of their home when she heard a loud sound coming from below. At first, she thought it was a broken dish that had fallen to the floor. Then she heard Dwayne's voice, who was calling for her. Gabrielle did not react right away. It took several more screams before she went down the stairs to the kitchen. What she saw shocked her. Brenda lay in Dwayne's arms, bleeding, with a large hole in her chest from the attack wound by gun. The Thurman family lived just 2 miles from Valley Hospital. They wasted no time. Dwayne carried Brenda to the car, and Gabrielle got behind the wheel. Dwayne dialed the emergency number. They rushed to the hospital. Doctors performed surgery, but unfortunately, it was too late. The victim could not be saved. One of the law enforcement officers found Dwayne sobbing in the emergency room. He was hysterical and couldn't calm down, alarming both the patients and staff. At one point, he threw up in the sink. When asked what had happened in the kitchen of their house, he cried out, "It's my fault, I'm an idiot." The gun accidentally went off. The Thurmans had been married for 18 years. Together they raised 2 children, Gabrielle and Michael. Dwayne met Brenda while serving in the Army Military Police. Brenda was known as the first woman to complete her training at the U.S. Sniper School. After completing her service, she received a master's degree and began a career as a support consultant with the Veterans Health Administration. Thanks to her work, dozens of soldiers underwent rehabilitation after experiencing emotional and mental trauma, enabling them to return to normal life. Dwayne also took a job at the Veterans Health Administration. By many accounts, the Thurmans' marriage was strong. Nevertheless, beneath the surface, hidden problems may have existed that they had not disclosed to anyone. Dwayne bought Brenda a turquoise Glock .380 pistol for her birthday. Shooting became a common activity for them. According to Dwayne, they wanted to rekindle warmth and love after a long period of tension in their relationship. The day before Brenda's death, they had a pleasant time at the shooting range. On January 18th, Dwayne sat at the kitchen table preparing both his and Brenda's pistols for cleaning. His gun had no magazine. He claimed he saw Brenda check the chambers for ammo and felt confident that the gun was safe to disassemble. Despite this, when he pulled the bolt, a deafening shot rang out. Dwayne told detectives that the turquoise Glock pistol had failed to eject shells the very first time they took it to the shooting range. It sometimes jammed, and the shell would get stuck inside. That morning, they had gone to breakfast and then returned home. Dwayne sat down to disassemble the gun. About 20 to 30 minutes passed before the shot rang out. He recounted, he just started to disassemble the gun when Brenda came over, sat in front of him, and began searching the internet for reasons for the cartridge jamming. As he started to disassemble it, it fired. Dwayne's account seemed credible because the situation in the kitchen was consistent with his description. Both pistols lay on the table, and the cleaning accessories were ready and nearby. The chair where Brenda had been sitting was moved away from the table, and the iPad she had used was lying on the floor. Spokane County investigators listened carefully to Dwayne Thurman's story and learned that their relationship had indeed been problematic. Dwayne claimed that he and Brenda had mutually agreed to an open marriage. Gabrielle and Michael confirmed that their father had been having affairs for years and openly admitted it. Dwayne insisted that the decision to pursue an open lifestyle was mutual. Brenda had also been dating a coworker, but Dwayne did not know him personally. Law enforcement agencies noted that Dwayne's actions were typical of someone faced with an accident. He repeatedly called Gabrielle, hurriedly drove his wife to the hospital instead of waiting for an ambulance, and called the police en route so that officers would meet them. All these signs indicated that he did not intentionally fire the gun. However, Gabrielle did not agree with this version of events. Some time passed between the sound she heard and the moment she went downstairs. When she entered the kitchen, Dwayne was holding her mother in his arms and did not provide any medical assistance. Why had he not made a call immediately after the incident? They arrived at the hospital too late, and Brenda's injuries were fatal. Gabrielle is certain that her stepfather, the man who adopted and raised her, deliberately shot Brenda. She asked the officers to detain him. In cases like this, when a gunshot results in death, it is necessary to look at all the facts, circumstances, and try to determine the intent of the potential killer. Despite Gabrielle's strong suspicions, the Spokane County detectives did not have the necessary evidence to bring charges. County medical examiner determined that the bullet that killed Brenda hit her directly in the center of her upper chest. The doctor concluded that the death was accidental. She made her assessment based on information received from detectives present at the autopsy. They saw no malicious intent and believed that the weapon had been fired accidentally. Based on this information, the expert classified the incident as an accidental death, which led to the investigation being stopped. A week after Brenda's death, another employee of the Veterans Health Department, Chief Surgeon John Marshall, disappeared. His wife, Susan, called the police on the morning of January 26 to report her husband missing. He was scheduled for surgery at 8 a.m., but he failed to show up at the hospital. The search for John began immediately. Law enforcement had been tracking the doctor since 5:30 a.m. when he arrived at the Youth Policy Center to change for a morning jog. The doctor left his personal belongings in a locker and left the center dressed in athletic shorts and a jacket. He took his iPod Nano and headphones with him. John's usual route was along the Spokane River, where there was a walking path along the steep bank nearby. Investigators were certain that if John slipped on the path, he could not have fallen into the river. Susan had a different opinion. She remembered that her husband was going for a run, but his car was still parked near the center. She did not wait for the search to begin near the riverbank. Instead, she gathered volunteers to inspect the area. At 9 a.m. the next day, an employee of an insurance company on the North Bank reported seeing a man's body in the river. Rescue teams went to the scene and soon found John floating near some bushes along the North Bank, downstream from the Monroe Street Bridge. This was the very spot where Susan and her assistants had begun their search the day before. John was found fully clothed, with his jacket folded up. He was floating face up, and this position suggested that he had been deliberately thrown into the water. There was a clear path leading to that place, which was right on the riverbank. A garden hose and a bicycle part were also found in the water. There were no signs that a seizure had preceded his death. Investigators believed that if John had a seizure, it would have been difficult for him to reach the river. It was possible that someone attacked John with the intention of robbing him or harming him out of revenge. However, given his service in the military and in Afghanistan, it would have been difficult to kill John. The police put forth the theory that he could have fallen or jumped from the Monroe Street Bridge. Later, when investigators studied John's biography, they ruled out the take-his-own-life version. In the past, they had faced financial difficulties and solved some family problems, but John never showed signs of depression. Additionally, the surveillance cameras covering the entire length of the bridge never recorded him that morning. Most likely, John slipped in another place upriver and fell into the water. At that moment, he may have been sucked into a whirlpool near the base of the bridge and held underwater for about a day or so, which is about the same amount of time that he could not be found. His body floated up, and the next morning it was spotted from the shore. An autopsy did not reveal the typical injuries that occur from falling from a height in a take-his-own-life, but experts found blunt force trauma to the chest that could have been caused by impact with the water. The death was eventually ruled an accidental drowning. However, all versions were considered, and one of the detectives worked diligently on the case while checking other evidence. In April 2016, the detective stated that he couldn't definitively say what caused John's death, although he had no evidence of outside involvement. Within 1 week, the Spokane VA lost 2 prominent staff members, a consultant and a leading surgeon, both of whom died in tragic accidents. This led some to question whether the events were connected. Initially, colleagues and friends had differing opinions. Some claimed that it was impossible to say for sure whether Brenda and John knew each other, although Brenda was scheduled to transfer to the same hospital where John worked that week. However, others claimed that the two had interacted in the hallways and were most likely in a romantic relationship. After hearing law enforcement's conclusion that John's death was an accident, his wife hired former police detective and now private investigator Ted Pulver. Ted began to examine evidence that had been ignored or insufficiently investigated, which allowed him the opportunity to expose the secret affair between John and Brenda Thurman. Ted noted that despite the alleged fall into the river, John's clothes were unharmed and not even torn. His iPod Nano was in his pocket, and the headphone wires remained intact, hanging from the device into the water. The most suspicious aspect was that it showed no signs of water damage, its screen was intact, and the device turned on and functioned perfectly. This seemed impossible if we assume that the device had been in a whirlpool for more than 24 hours. Additionally, there was no obvious place along the river from which he could have accidentally fallen into the water. John's body had virtually no damage from the water and stones. There was also no water in that location that would lift the body into shallow water. His shoes, socks, and iPod remained in their places. When a person floats down the river, items from their pockets often fall out, and parts of clothing are typically lost while passing through rapids. A person hitting rocks could sustain injuries, yet nothing like that happened to John's body. The detective assumed that during his morning job, John was the victim of an attack by intruders who grabbed him and carried him to another location, where they waited until the police stopped searching. 24 hours later, he was thrown into the river. The presence of two objects found near the body in the water, a garden hose and a black bicycle frame, suggested that he had been drowned. Susan, like the detective she hired, believed that this theory explained the physical evidence, while the forensic medical examiner did not reach the same conclusion. As an experienced surgeon, she made her own determination based on the autopsy results, believing that the blunt force trauma to John's chest was inflicted before, and not after, death, and that the body had clearly been moved and dumped in the river. She also pointed out a red streak on her husband's neck, which was not mentioned in the medical examiner's report due to the lack of a formal police investigation. In an effort to achieve justice, Susan decided to assist Gabrielle and her brother Michael in filing a civil suit against Dwayne Thurman for Brenda's death. This would prevent Dwayne from profiting financially from his wife's death, including the pension, and more importantly, it would call into question the nature of the original investigation and force law enforcement to examine the gaps in the case in detail. It seemed that the police were in no hurry to act. The turquoise pistol the victim had sent for testing immediately after her death sat in line while the overburdened and under-resourced Washington State Crime Lab worked on other criminal cases. 16 months passed before the gun tests began, and even then, it was only because of the civil suit. The testing revealed nothing significant, after which Dwayne Thurman was arrested and charged with manslaughter. This was not the first-degree murder charge that the family had hoped for, which meant that the authorities were not going to prove that the man had fired the gun intentionally. As a result, Gabrielle's testimony about the alleged murder plan was not presented, and her opinion that he had premeditated the murder went unheard in the courtroom. The trial was very short, lasting only several days. Dwayne voiced his position, recounting the terrible incident through tears and describing in detail the mistake he made in not properly observing firearms safety rules. He assumed the gun was unloaded, but it was not. The jury deliberated for about 2 hours the first day and another 3 hours the next. In the end, they found Dwayne not guilty of first-degree manslaughter, which was a serious charge, he guilty of second-degree manslaughter. In determining the sentence, the judge considered his status as a deputy sheriff in a neighboring county, as well as his military career and many years of experience working as a social worker. Dwayne was sentenced to 5 years, 2 years for the accident and 3 years for using a firearm. Spokane County prosecutor again faced questions about why the complete facts were not presented at the trial regarding Dwayne Thurman's potential involvement in the death of his wife and potential suspicions surrounding Brenda's children. He noted that additional information was not taken into account, most likely because the court focused solely on the negligence surrounding the firearm and not on anything else. However, if there was evidence of intent, why was the charge brought only under the statute relating to negligent homicide? What facts indicated that Dwayne had a reason to intend to take the life of his wife? In the spring of 2020, The John Marshall case was sent back for retrial, during which time Susan began to speak publicly about the connection between Brenda Case and her husband's death. The retrial could lead to a reopening of the case in the future. While there is no direct evidence linking Dwayne to the murder of John, whose death is still considered accidental. However, private investigator Ted has claimed that anonymous individuals at the Veterans Health Administration have evidence of an affair between Brenda and John. Susan noted that whether or not John was faithful to her is not the main point. The essential question is whether the killer believed that Brenda was dating Dr. John. Rumors about this are certainly discussed at the institution. In May 2022, a new specialist took the position of forensic expert, giving Brenda's family a chance to make a second statement 6 years after her death was deemed accidental. The expert concluded that it was most likely murder. Unfortunately, his decision does not grant the right to bring new charges in this case, as Dwayne Thurman has already been found guilty of second-degree manslaughter and cannot be tried again on murder charges. Dwayne Thurman was released from prison in September 2022, and John Marshall's case remains unsolved. The tragic deaths of Brenda Thurman and John Marshall in January 2016 left Spokane grappling with grief and unanswered questions. Brenda's death, initially ruled accidental but later deemed a homicide, resulted in Dwayne Thurman's conviction for second-degree manslaughter, yet doubts about his intent persist, fueled by Gabrielle's unwavering belief in foul play. John Marshall's drowning, still classified as accidental, continues to raise suspicions of a connection, driven by unproven rumors of an affair and Susan's relentless pursuit of truth. Despite the civil suit and re-examinations, both cases remain shrouded in ambiguity, underscoring the challenges of uncovering intent in the face of conflicting evidence. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Maria Luisa. Maria Luisa was born on May 29, 1977, in La Fortuna, San Carlos, in Alajuela, Costa Rica. She was the youngest of 5 children in a humble family. From an early age, she was ambitious and determined. She wanted to help people and dreamed of becoming a doctor, telling herself she would be the first in her family to get a college degree. During her school years, she excelled in chemistry and biology, her favorite subjects. After graduating in 1994, she was accepted into the country's most prestigious medical school, located in San Jose. As a student, Maria moved to the capital and lived there for the rest of her life. However, she still maintains a close relationship with her family, visiting and get in touch with them. In 2000, after earning her degree, Maria began working as an anesthesiologist at one of the largest medical centers in the capital. She quickly excelled in her career, continuously learning and honing her skills. By 2015, she had risen to become the head of the anesthesiology and recovery therapy department. She was highly respected and admired by her colleagues, become a famous doctor. However, to achieve success, Maria had to trade in her personal life. For many years, she was alone, fully dedicated to her work. In 2017, at the age of 40, she started dating a doctor at the same hospital, though he worked in a different department. She believed he was her true love and someone with whom she could build a happy family. Unfortunately, at the start of 2020, their relationship ended, and he started dating a younger co-worker. The breakup was a painful experience for Maria. She suffered from severe depression and focused only on work for months, barely paying attention to the world around her. Her only source of comfort was her small dog, Mafalda, she loved and cared for as if he were her child. In July 2020, Maria felt like she needed some time off and change your living environment to relax your mind. She decided to visit the coast and stay at a small, cozy hotel called La Mansion Inn, located in the picturesque Punta Arenas region. Before, this resort attracted tourists from around the world, but now this place is very deserted. At the hotel, only a few rooms were occupied, which provided the peace and quiet Maria was seeking. She planned to spend the weekend there and return home on Monday, bringing her beloved dog Mafalda along with her. Maria stayed in a room on the ground floor, has a second door leading to a private yard. These rooms are designed for guests with pets, so it can go outside and relieve themselves in a designated area. At the time, all the other rooms with courtyard access were unoccupied. On July 18, Maria arrived, left her belongings in her room, and went to the beach. The following day was equally uneventful. She walked along the shore, relaxed in the sun, had dinner at a restaurant, and returned to her room. That evening, she called her mother, and they talked for about 30 minutes. During the call, Maria remarked on how empty the hotel felt, with only a handful of staff members. She intended to check out the next morning, after breakfast, but she never did. On the morning of July 20, Maria did not come down for breakfast. The hotel staff noticed her absence, as there were very few guests, but assumed she was simply sleeping. However, when checkout time arrived, and she still hadn't appeared, they decided to check her room. 2 staff members knocked on her door but received no response. They could hear her dog barking inside, which confirmed she was there. Despite repeatedly knocking and calling her name, the only sound was the dog's barking. Concerned, they went to the courtyard to see if they could access her room from another entrance. They found the second door unlocked and decided to go inside to see what was going on. As soon as they stepped inside, they noticed brownish stains on the floor, resembling dried blood. On the bed, they discovered a body wrapped in a sheet. The staff immediately contacted emergency services and informed hotel management. Unfortunately, when paramedics arrived, they confirmed that Maria was dead. She had been killed several hours before her body was discovered. The scene was deeply unsettling, from the condition of the room to the circumstances surrounding her death. Maria's body showed multiple cuts, bruises, and bite marks inflicted by different individuals. Defensive wounds on her hands indicated she had fought back desperately. The cause of death was determined to be mechanical asphyxia and a broken neck. She had been strangled with such force that her cervical vertebrae were fractured. The autopsy confirmed that Maria had been sexually assaulted before her death. Beside her bed, there was a bottle of mineral water, an opened bottle of expensive wine, and 2 glasses. According to hotel staff, she had ordered these items the previous night, but she was alone at the time. Maria's keycard records show that after she received the items, she did not leave the room and no one entered. However, the glass door leading to the courtyard did not require a key, which could have allowed the attacker to gain access. The hotel had several security cameras that could have helped shed some light on the matter, but it turned out they had all been out of service for months. The hotel management explained that they had cut costs by shutting off the cameras. Forensic experts analyzed the bite marks on Maria's body for DNA, expecting to find the attacker's saliva. However, the results were shocking. The saliva belonged to Maria herself. Since the bite marks were located on her face, neck, and chest, areas she could not have reached herself, investigators deduced that the attacker had deliberately placed her saliva on the wounds to conceal their own DNA. Another disturbing detail revealed by the pathologist was that Maria's body had been thoroughly cleaned after her death. This indicated that after torturing, strangling, and killing her, the attackers washed her body in the bathroom, placed her back on the bed, contaminated the bite marks with her saliva, and wrapped her body in a sheet. Because the hotel's cameras were not working and the grounds were very deserted, no witnesses could be identified. Both guests and hotel staff reported that they did not see anything unusual, and they did not see any strangers appearing on the premises. The brutal murder of Maria, a famous anesthesiologist, quickly became the focus of national attention, causing great public outrage. Police are under pressure to investigate and find the culprit who committed the brutal act against an innocent woman. When asked if Maria might have had a brief romance during the trip, her family firmly denied it. She was still heartbroken over a recent breakup and had been hoping for reconciliation. Regarding the 2 glasses found in the room, Maria's sister explained that she always used 2 glasses, one for wine and one for water. Forensic analysis confirmed this explanation, as only Maria's fingerprints and lip marks were found on the glasses. During their interview with the police, her mother suddenly remembered something from her daughter's last phone call. Maria had mentioned chatting with a man who worked at the hotel during lunch. She said he had asked her why she was traveling alone and how long she planned to stay. This detail provided detectives with their first suspect to investigate. The employee in question was 38 years old, Teodoro Herrera, the son of a close friend of the hotel owner, Harry Baudin. In fact, thanks to his father's connection with Harry, he got the job at the hotel. He worked as a bartender and also ran personal errands for Harry. During his interview with the police, he behaved oddly. He was extremely nervous. He claimed that he did not know Maria and did not remember ever speaking to her. Detectives noticed fresh scratches on Teodoro's cheeks and neck, for which he couldn't provide a clear explanation. When asked to remove his shirt, similar scratches were found on his chest and shoulders. Investigators suspected these marks were left by Maria as she fought for her life, but they needed forensic confirmation. He was arrested and held for 6 months while the investigation continued. Forensic analysis later confirmed that blood and skin particles from Teodoro were found under Maria's nails. However, the bite marks on her body did not match his dental impressions. The investigation then shifted focus to a 36-year-old man named Luis Carlos Miranda. He was not a regular guest or employee at La Mansion Inn, but he was a friend of the hotel owner, Harry, and often stayed there for free. One of the bite marks on Maria's body was potentially linked to he, though it wasn't conclusive. Still, the police arrested him as a second suspect and detained him for 6 months, just like Teodoro. He also denied ever meeting Maria or having any interaction with her. About 10 days after the murder, a third suspect was arrested, Harry Baudin, the 69-year-old hotel owner. Harry, a businessman of Dutch origin, was well connected with politicians. He owned multiple properties across different countries. His arrest was prompted by a bite mark on Maria's body that matched his dental impressions. Investigators also discovered that about 6 months before the murder, he had undergone surgery at the hospital where Maria worked. Although he claimed he had never met her, police suspected he might have noticed her during his hospital stay, obtained her contact information, and lured her to his hotel. Initially, Harry was placed under house arrest due to his age and health problems. However, when he moved to a new residence without informing the authorities, he was taken into custody over concerns he might attempt to flee the country. Another individual connected to the case was Harry's husband, Yader Daniel Abanda. However, no evidence was found to convict him. He denied any involvement, stating that Harry had been unwell that night and had not left their room. After reviewing the autopsy and forensic results, investigators determined that there were 3 attackers involved. There were no signs of ropes or restraints used to hold down Maria, but all her limbs displayed bruises consistent with being pinned by hands. Fabric fibers and a thread were discovered inside her mouth, indicating she had been gagged. This likely explains why none of the other guests or staff heard her screams, although her injuries and signs of torture showed that she must have been desperately calling for help. On Maria's phone, found in her room, there were messages to her sister in which she praised the hotel. She described it as beautiful, cozy, and quiet, complimenting the staff for being attentive. She also mentioned spending the evening chatting and dancing at the bar with the man who served coffee, identified as Teodoro. From the start, Teodoro was the main suspect. He was the only suspect of the 3 with visible scratches, and forensic evidence revealed his skin and blood under Maria's fingernails. Additionally, his DNA was found on her body, despite his attempts to wash it off. However, dental cast comparisons showed that his teeth did not match the bite marks on her skin. After returning to her room, Maria stayed in her room all evening and didn't allow anyone inside. Investigators suspected the attackers entered through the door leading to the courtyard. It's possible she left the door unlocked for her dog to go outside. Since the neighboring rooms were unoccupied, no one would have noticed. Once inside, the attackers acted quickly. They struck Maria on the head, rendering her unconscious, gagged her, and then subjected her to hours of torture and assault. Afterward, they strangled her with such force that her neck was broken. They then washed her body in the bathroom, placed it on the bed, and wrapped it in a sheet, dirtying the bite wound with her saliva. During the trial, all three suspects, Teodoro, Harry, and Luis, denied involvement, claiming they were asleep in their rooms that night. However, no witnesses could corroborate their alibis. Investigators found disturbing text messages on their phones in which they shared frightening thoughts. The day before the crime, they even discussed a guest who was alone. The trial is set for September 2022, more than 2 years after the murder. Harry, 71, had to appear in court in a wheelchair because of worsening knee problems that made it difficult for him to walk. The prosecution immediately had difficulty proving Harry and Luis's involvement in the crime. The evidence against them was largely circumstantial, consisting of text messages and dental impressions. The defense argued that the bite marks should be dismissed as evidence because they did not perfectly match their dental records. To support this argument, Harry's lawyer hired an orthodontist from Madrid to testify. After analyzing the bite marks on Maria's body, orthodontist concluded that they were insufficient as evidence and could not definitively establish a link between Harry, Luis, and the crime. However, after orthodontist returned to Spain the following day, the prosecution questioned his credentials. Further investigation confirmed that he did not have a valid certificate and was merely a self-proclaimed expert. As a result, his testimony was discredited and thrown out. Despite this, the prosecution was determined to prove a connection between Harry, Luis, and the case. They argued that the brutal, calculated nature of the assault and murder indicated the involvement of at least 3 people. The defense denied this claim, insisting that a healthy individual was perfectly capable of performing the act without assistance. The verdict was delivered with clear and undeniable evidence, all pointing to Teodoro Herrera as the culprit. His DNA was found in Maria's body, his skin cells appeared under her fingernails, and her blood was discovered both on the outside and inside of his shoes. The shoe prints matched those found at the entrance of her room and near the bed. Consequently, he was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 50 years in prison without the possibility of parole. At 40 years old, this effectively amounted to a life sentence. He admitted to being intimate with Maria that night, but claimed it was consensual and insisted someone else must have killed her after he left. In contrast, there was insufficient evidence against Harry and Luis. Apart from bite marks and text messages, nothing concrete linked them to the crime. As a result, they were acquitted and released in March 2023. However, in September of the same year, an appeals court revisited the case after a complaint from Maria's family and ordered it to be reopened. By then, Harry and Luis had already fled Costa Rica, leaving the country immediately after their release. They are currently living in the Netherlands, and even if the trial is reopened and they are found guilty, they will not face any consequences because the Netherlands and Costa Rica do not have an extradition treaty, even though this is a very serious crime. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Victoria Nasirova. On September 2, 2016, police received a call from Olga Zvik, 35, a Ukrainian immigrant who worked as a beautician, who reported that several valuables had gone missing from her bedroom. She explained to police that she had recently been to the hospital, where she experienced severe dizziness and nausea, with occasional loss of consciousness. Even after returning home, she continued to appear distracted. During the investigation, the police conducted a detailed interrogation of Olga. She recalled a recent troubling encounter with a client named Victoria Nasirova, who came to her home and insisted on urgent eyelash extensions. Victoria had been in contact with the salon before and often acted as if she and Olga were friends. However, on that day, Victoria asked to come to Olga's home to get eyelash extensions. Olga explained that she only worked at the salon and did not accept home customers, but Victoria deliberately ignored her explanation and insisted on urgent eyelash extensions, and Olga finally agreed. Olga later told the police that Victoria had tried to ask her out several times, but she had refused. Another notable detail was that Victoria looked very similar to Olga, which often made Olga feel uncomfortable. During the investigation, it was discovered that Victoria had shown up at Olga's apartment with 3 pieces of cheesecake from the best local bakery. Victoria ate 2 and insisted that Olga have a third, to which Olga eventually agreed. After a brief tea party with cheesecakes, Olga felt unwell. Once Victoria left, Olga became extremely nauseous and lost consciousness for about 30 minutes. When she woke up, she called 911 and was taken to the hospital by ambulance. However, the doctors found nothing wrong in her blood tests. Upon returning home, Olga discovered that some of her valuables were missing and reported the theft to the police. Police were initially skeptical of her story, suspecting that Olga may have been under the influence of drugs, which were causing her to hallucinate. Her unusual behavior and appearance contributed to their suspicions. Police concluded that her account of the incident, including her reference to a woman who resembled her, was likely fabricated. Olga firmly denied using drugs and presented her argument convincingly. She believed that her issues stemmed from a piece of cheesecake she had eaten, suggesting it might have been poisoned. The police quickly inspected the scene and discovered a box from a local bakery in the trash. Olga identified the box as the cheesecake Victoria had brought. The police collected it as evidence because it still had crumbs left inside. Analysis of the cheesecake could determine whether it was the cause of Olga's problems. The examination of the cheesecake revealed no abnormalities. Despite this, the Olga insisted that the dessert was the reason for her illness. She mentioned that she had visited the hospital, where doctors examined her but found nothing unusual. In response to inquiries about her condition and the tests conducted, police contacted the hospital. However, the doctors declined to share information due to privacy policies. The police interpreted this refusal as further evidence to doubt the Olga's claims. Additionally, they could not locate the client mentioned by Olga, leading to a postponement of the case until more information becomes available. A neighbor provided details after noticing a suspicious woman near Olga's apartment the following day. The woman appeared several times, lingering around Olga's apartment until she encountered the neighbor. The strange woman said that her friend Olga was sick and then left in a hurry. Concerned, the neighbor noticed that Olga's apartment door was open and decided to check on her. When she entered, the neighbor found the apartment uncomfortably hot, with the heating system on full blast despite the hot summer weather. Olga was alive but unconscious in bed, dressed strangely, in a revealing bra and sweatpants. The police felt that someone had deliberately changed her clothes. Scattered around her were powerful pills, suggesting that Olga may have taken them with the intention of ending her life. The neighbor quickly called 911, describing the strange woman as dark-haired, attractive, and very similar to Olga. After receiving new information, the police were convinced that the woman who resembled Olga was real and not a figment of Olga's imagination. Therefore, the police intensified their efforts to investigate the case. The police suspected that Victoria Nasirova, who was involved in a cheesecake in the previous case, was involved in this case. The police began searching for Victoria, but they had no clues or even any photos of her. However, a private investigator, who had been monitoring Victoria's activities for a long time, tracked Victoria down on the internet and contacted the police. He located Victoria, where she was advertising her escort services on a dating website and social media. The private investigator suspected that she used these platforms to find victims for her crimes. Her methods were effective. Victoria would meet her victims, drug them with psychotropic substances to render them unconscious, and then steal their valuables. Meanwhile, Olga eventually recovered from her traumatic experience. After leaving the hospital, she shared her story of poisoning on social media. Soon after, one of her clients mentioned a man named Ruben Barakov who had gone through a similar situation. Ruben owned a dry cleaning business and had met a woman named Victoria on a Russian dating site a few months before Olga suffered cheese poisoning. Victoria had invited Ruben to her home, bragging about her cooking skills. He accepted the invitation, but as soon as he tasted her food, he passed out. Victoria then rummaged through his pockets, taking an expensive watch, cash, and cards. Ruben was under the influence of a powerful psychoactive substance and truly believed that it had nearly killed him. Victoria then took him to a dry cleaner's. She explained to Ruben's colleagues that he was drunk and she left. When Ruben regained consciousness, he realized that he had been robbed. The private investigator suspected the situation was much more serious and that the two victims were lucky to be alive. In 2017, he worked with a client from Russia who asked him to help track down a dangerous criminal. Nadia Ford contacted the private investigator after her biological mother, Alla Alexienko, went missing. Nadia currently lives in New York, USA, but was born in Russia. Nadia, who is from Krasnodar, was raised by her mother, Alla, who worked hard to provide for her children. Nadia had dreamed of living in the United States since she was a child, and her dream came true when she came to study in America in 2007. While there, she met a man, married him, and took his last name, Ford. However, their marriage did not last, and they eventually divorced. Nadia chose to stay in the United States and successfully built her life there. She kept a close relationship with her mother, Alla, who was living alone at the time. Alla sold her house and then moved to a new apartment. In early 2013, after moving into a new apartment, Alla had a new neighbor named Victoria Nasirova. Despite the significant age difference, Victoria quickly became friends with Alla. Alla shared stories about her daughter's life in the United States, which sparked Victoria's interest in visiting America and meeting Nadia. Alla then arranged for them to meet. In September 2013, Victoria went to New York, where she met Nadia, and they became close friends. Nadia was a kind and pleasant woman. Victoria sought her advice on how to stay in the United States, and Nadia shared a few tips. However, Victoria's plans did not work out, and she eventually returned to Russia. Despite this, she maintained a close relationship with Alla. In the fall of 2014, Victoria planned another trip to the United States, and she told Alla that she could help send gifts to Nadia. Trusting Victoria, Alla happily agreed. Alla then brought $6,000 in cash and valuables, including 2 expensive mink coats, to send to Nadia. Victoria then repeatedly postponed her trip to the United States for various reasons, leaving Alla worried about whether she would actually go and what would happen to her gifts. Worried, Alla called her daughter Nadia to express her concerns. Nadia reassured her mother and suggested that she ask Victoria to return her belongings. On October 4, 2014, Alla called Nadia with the good news that she had finally spoken to Victoria, who agreed to return her valuables. However, this never happened, and Alla soon disappeared. Nadia kept calling her mother, but she didn't answer. This was unusual, since they were in contact every day. Worried, Nadia contacted Victoria to ask about her mother. Victoria confirmed that she had seen Alla, and they had talked and had tea together. Victoria then left, never saw Alla again. Victoria mentioned that Alla was planning to go somewhere, but she didn't know where. Victoria also tried to contact Alla and even visited Alla's apartment to check on her, but there was no sign of her mother being home. Alla was still unreachable. After a few days, Nadia and her brother received a number of unusual text messages from an unknown number, supposedly from their mother Alla. The messages stated that there was no need to look for her because she was happy. However, the way the messages were written was inconsistent with Alla's style, which raised their concerns. Nadia realized that something was definitely wrong and decided to book the next flight to Russia to assist in the investigation into her mother's disappearance. Upon arriving in Krasnodar, Nadia went to her mother's apartment, but it was stripped of valuables that Victoria was supposed to return. There was no trace of her mother. Concerned, Nadia quickly contacted the police and reported her mother's disappearance. She informed the police about her suspicions regarding Victoria, a neighbor of her mother who had become suspiciously close to her and failed to return Alla belongings. It soon became clear that Victoria had a motive to harm Alla. The police were interested in the information and devised a plan. Nadia called Victoria and pressed Victoria for information about her mother's whereabouts. Victoria, angered by Nadia's questions, shouted that her mother was still alive, but Victoria did not know where she was. The police, who had been listening in on the call, decided to approach Victoria. At her home, she successfully convinced the police that she was not involved and claimed that Nadia's accusations were baseless, with no evidence against her. Meanwhile, Nadia returned to her mother's apartment to investigate. She noticed that the place was surprisingly clean, with no dust, as if it had just been thoroughly cleaned, despite her mother's absence for several days. This raised questions for Nadia. Who could have cleaned the apartment? Additionally, she discovered that several valuable items, including jewelry and $50,000 in cash, were missing. Concerned, Nadia decided to report this to the police. The police, after speaking with Victoria, tried to persuade her that her mother had taken the money and jewelry on a trip and would be back soon. However, Nadia did not buy this explanation. She sensed that her mother was in danger and that it had something to do with Victoria. Nadia reached out to all her mother's friends and relatives, but no one knew where her mother was. In her desperation, Nadia printed flyers with her mother's photo and posted them all over the neighborhood. She also drove around the city, visiting her mother's favorite places, but her efforts were unproductive. Nadia contacted Victoria, begging her to return her mother and expressing her willingness to do anything, even offer a reward. However, Victoria denied any involvement. Despite this, Nadia remained hopeful that her mother was still alive and continued to search. She regularly went to the police for updates, but there was no information about her mother. Determined to find answers, Nadia hired a private investigator. After investigating, the private investigator discovered that Victoria had rented a car from a service center on the day Alla went missing. He checked the car's information and reviewed surveillance camera footage from October 5, 2014. The videos show a car driving on a highway outside the city. There were two people inside, Victoria, who was driving, and Alla Alexenko, motionless in the front passenger seat. She shared this information with the police, who confirmed that Victoria had rented the car and brought her in for questioning. Victoria admitted that she had driven the rental car that morning, October 5, but she denied that there was anyone else in the car with her. Victoria agreed to take a lie detector test. After completing the test, she was released, but the results later showed that she had failed, leading the police to consider her a prime suspect in the case. Before the police could arrest her, Victoria fled the country without notifying the police. They began searching for Victoria. Nadia remained in Russia for another 6 months to assist in the investigation, holding out hope that her mother was still alive. She also contacted Interpol for help in finding Victoria. Police traced the rental car to a dense forest in Armavir, which turned out to be Victoria's hometown. This is where the search for Alla began. Nadia's hopes of her mother's safe return were dashed in April 2015, when police informed her of the tragic news. Her charred remains were found in the same forest, about a 3-hour drive from where Ala went missing. Nadia was able to identify her mother through her dental records, as the rest of her body was badly burned and unrecognizable. The cause of death could not be determined. Following the identification, an arrest warrant was issued for Victoria Nasirova, and her case was referred to Interpol. After her mother's funeral in Krasnodar, Nadia returned to the United States. She found it difficult to cope with her mother's death and was unable to work for a long period. Eventually, she gathered her strength and made a promise to her mother that she would seek justice and ensure that those responsible for Ala's death would be punished. One day, Nadia discovered a photo of Victoria on social media. The wanted woman was showing off her lavish lifestyle in Mexico. After discovering this, Nadia contacted the U.S. police to report Victoria's whereabouts, and they began an investigation. At this point, Nadia hired one of the top private detectives in the United States to speed up the investigation. A wealthy friend of Nadia covered the cost of the detective's services, which she could not afford since she had not been working for several months while searching for her mother. The private detective thoroughly examined Victoria's social media photos and was able to confirm that she was already in the U.S. One of the selfies, taken while wearing sunglasses, showed a reflection of a car's dashboard. After examining hundreds, even thousands of cars, the private investigator determined it was a Chrysler 300. The private investigator was able to determine that the last photos were taken in Sheepshead Bay, a neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York. By checking a database of cars in that area, he was able to narrow down his search and identify a suspect. He discovered that Victoria was living with her boyfriend in an apartment complex just 5 blocks from Nadia, and that the Chrysler was registered to her new boyfriend. Victoria was probably unaware that the case had escalated to the point where Interpol had a global warrant for her arrest, which is why she felt safe posting her photos online. The private investigator located the boyfriend and contacted him. It was discovered that he had been poisoned by Victoria. She followed her usual methods of poisoning her boyfriend and even poisoned his beagle, which unfortunately died. Victoria's freedom poses a danger, as her potential victims could increase. The police searched Victoria's apartment and discovered Olga Tzvik's identity card. This discovery sheds light on why Olga was targeted by Victoria. Victoria needed money and valuables, but she also needed an ID that. With her temporary visa about to expire, she was looking to use someone else's ID to avoid returning to Russia, where she would have to stand trial. Police believe she intended to kill Olga, the real owner of the passport, to steal their identity. Fortunately, Olga survived thanks to the quick action of a neighbor. Additionally, the box containing the remains of the cheesecake was sent for analysis, marking a significant breakthrough in the investigation. The investigation returned to the lab, where researchers analyzed the cheesecake. It was determined that Victoria had used a sedative, but she had used a higher dose, which rendered her victims unconscious. Olga was lucky to survive after eating the cheesecake. The high temperature in her apartment was no accident. Heat amplifies the effects of the drug and can even be fatal. Victoria apparently knew this, so she increased the temperature in the house and tried to dress Olga in warmer clothes. But luckily, Olga was discovered by neighbors in time. After her arrest, Victoria denied all allegations against her, including the murder of Ala, who was Nadia's mother. She also rejected claims that she attempted to murder Olga Tzvik and other victims. Victoria had previously been a suspect in the theft of 2 fur items in May 2016, but that case did not progress. Additional incidents emerged involving her in thefts, where she would meet men online, visit their homes, drug them, and rob them. Most of the men chose not to report these crimes to the police due to concerns about publicity, allowing Victoria to evade consequences. The trial was delayed for a long time. The case finally went to court in January 2023. attracting considerable media and public attention. Victoria chose not to testify at the trial and remained silent. The court could not discuss the details of Allah's death because it happened in another country. Victoria's defense argued that there was no evidence that Victoria had poisoned the cheesecake and forced Olga to eat it. Victoria herself ate 2 pieces in front of Olga and had no problems. The prosecution then argued that Victoria had only added poison to 1 piece of cheesecake, specifically the 3rd piece she offered Olga. She ate the other 2 pieces without the poison. This misled Olga. After a lengthy deliberation, the jury found Victoria Nasirova guilty of 2nd-degree murder. Although the maximum sentence for the crime is 25 years, the judge shortened her sentence to 21 years. By law, she could apply for parole after serving 15 years. Victoria faced harsh prison life. She frequently complained about poor food and inadequate medical care. During her incarceration, she was attacked, leaving her scarred and nearly blind. After the attack, Victoria sued the prison, alleging that guards were negligent in failing to support her. The case ended in a $325,000 settlement. In a recent interview from prison, Victoria denied any wrongdoing, including Allah's murder. She claimed that she had nothing to do with poisoning beautician Olga with the cheesecake, explaining that she had eaten the cheesecake herself and had not become ill. Victoria said that she had only shared a piece of cheesecake with Olga and had not forced her to eat it. After completing her prison sentence in the United States, Victoria will be deported to Russia, where she will face trial for Allah's murder. Her daughter Nadia said she was relieved that Victoria was in prison and would not be able to escape justice. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Rocio Waninkoff. Hilaria Alicia Hornos was born on December 2, 1952, in the rural province of Jaén, Spain, specifically in the city of Arroyo del Ojanco. At the age of 24, she fell in love and married Willem Waninkoff, a Dutch citizen. They had 3 children, a son, Guillermo, followed by 2 daughters, Rosa and Rocio. However, as their family grew, so did the strain on their marriage. Willem suffered from alcoholism, which led to frequent absences from home and eventually led to his losing his job. Their arguments escalated, with Willem sometimes raising his voice at Alicia and becoming aggressive. To support her family, Alicia took a job as a maid at a hotel in Ibiza. During this difficult period, she met Dolores, who was the director of the hotel where she worked. Dolores Vasquez was the daughter of immigrants from Galicia. She is highly educated and polite, and a very interesting conversationalist. A strong friendship developed between Alicia and Dolores, which later developed into a romantic relationship. A year after starting her relationship with Dolores, Alicia decided to divorce Willem. He then returned to the Netherlands, and Alicia moved in with Dolores. Soon after, the couple bought a new house in Malaga. After the divorce, Alicia gained custody of all 3 children and raised them with Dolores. All 3 of Alicia's children loved Dolores, and the 5 of them lived together as a family. In 1988, Alicia and Dolores chose to end their romantic relationship, but continued to live together as friends until 1994. After 11 years, they parted ways, and Alicia began dating a man named Juan Charillo. She moved into a new place and embraced her new romantic life. With her children grown and her new partner by her side, life felt vibrant and full of love. On the morning of October 10, 1999, Alicia discovered that her daughter, Rocio, was missing. Initially, she wasn't alarmed, thinking Rocio might have spent the night at her boyfriend's house or a friend's place. However, as the day went on and Rocio still had not returned, Alicia grew worried. The family reached out to Rocio's friends and boyfriend, hoping to find out where she was, but no one had seen her. On the evening of October 9th, Rocio left home around 5:30 p.m. after saying goodbye to her mother and older sister, Rosa. She was headed to a fair in Fuengirola with her boyfriend, Antonio, and her friends. Rocio lived in the La Tierra neighborhood, which was very close to Antonio's house. She spent time at his place until 10:30 p.m. and planned to return home briefly to shower and change before heading to the fair. Unfortunately, she never arrived home. Although Alicia was worried about her daughter Rocio's disappearance, she chose to go for a walk with Juan instead of contacting the police immediately. While walking down the street, Alicia noticed a large blood stain on the road. She pointed it out to Juan, who initially didn't think much of it. However, as they got closer, Alicia noticed her daughter's sneakers lying there with drops of blood on them. Alicia was very panicked, and while walking, they also discovered a napkin and some blood on a vacant lot next to the path Rocio often walked. Alicia immediately called the police, and a missing person report was filed with a detailed description of Rocio. She had long hair, brown eyes, and was last seen wearing a white Nike t-shirt and purple pants. Police quickly arrived at the scene where the blood was found, and forensic officers conducted a forensic examination of the crime scene to determine whose blood was on the road and sneakers. Initially, the investigation suggested that there had been an assault or fight that resulted in injuries. The trail showed several bloodstains, including long ones that looked like someone had moved quickly, possibly running. Eventually, the bloodstains disappeared, but the search team discovered a large trail that suggested significant blood loss. They also discovered bloody footprints. These led to tire tracks, where the bloodstains stopped. Next to the tire tracks, they found a cigarette butt from a brand that is not common in Spain. Forensic teams have collected all relevant samples to assist in the investigation, and it is hoped that DNA from these samples will help identify people who were at the scene. A detailed investigation was conducted, along with analysis of the blood found at the scene. Although the search for Rocio continues, police believe it is highly likely that Rocio was murdered. The blood trail began on the sidewalk and led to a large pool of blood, indicating significant blood loss that likely led to her death. Nearby, there were drag marks near the tire. This tire was identified from a small car, specifically a tire model that was discontinued in 1993. Since the drag marks extended over a steep area, it can be concluded that at least 2 people moved the body before a vehicle later arrived to remove the body. The search for Rocio continued, with volunteers scouring the area on foot and on motorbikes. Flyers with Rocio's picture were widely distributed, and news channels reported extensively on Rocio's disappearance. The family actively cooperated with journalists to get the word out about Rocio. Reporters from all television channels gathered outside Rocio Vaninkoff's home, hoping for her safe return. However, as time passed, the search yielded no clues. A few days after Rocio's disappearance, a local taxi driver came to the police station with vital information. He reported that on the night of Rocio's disappearance, around 10 p.m., he narrowly avoided a collision with an SUV traveling at high speed in the opposite lane, near where Rocio's sneakers were found on the side of the road. As he passed the car, he also heard a loud scream. This evidence strongly suggested that Rocio had been abducted and murdered by an unknown assailant. DNA analysis later confirmed that the blood found on the road belonged to Rocio. The news left her family devastated, and the sense of loss quickly spread, affecting not only Rocio's loved ones, but the entire country of Spain. On November 2, 1999, 25 days after Rocio's disappearance, a disfigured body, believed to be Rocio's, was discovered near the Los Altos del Rodeo Athletic Club, between Marbella and San Pedro de Alcantara. The body was partially obscured by bushes and leaves, lying behind a fence separating a residential area from a nearby highway. The body was found on a narrow road that was difficult for cars to access. Rocio's body was found in another town. When police arrived, they found the body severely decomposed. During the collection of evidence, large black garbage bags containing Rocio's clothing were found. One of the bags had the number 8 painted on it, suggesting that the bags had been reused rather than purchased specifically for transporting the body. Police found clothing that they believed might belong to the missing Rocio. Her sister Rosa identified several rings, 2 t-shirts, and other items in 2 trash bags near the body as belonging to Rocio. The t-shirts had been torn from stab wounds. Rocio's body was then taken to the laboratory for forensic analysis, where experts worked carefully, applying their knowledge and skills. They faced a difficult task due to the severe decomposition of the body. Decomposition occurs much more quickly in rain and high temperatures, especially when there is humidity. The objective was to gather additional evidence to aid the investigation and understand how the attack happened. Several closed wounds were discovered, along with 8 stab wounds on the Rocio's back. Experts believe the attack was swift and violent, suggesting the Rocio was either restrained or unable to defend themselves. Fingerprints were found on plastic bags at the scene where the body was located. The police already had fingerprints and tire tracks from a vehicle, and they also collected 2 tissue samples from Rocio's body. At that stage, there was insufficient evidence to identify a specific suspect, but the investigation had gathered some information and leads. Public pressure had a significant impact on the investigation, prompting police to quickly search for evidence, but they were unable to. Because Rocio's body was so badly decomposed, they were unable to determine whether she had been sexually assaulted. Police speculated that the crime was motivated by personal vendetta and deep anger, suggesting that the attacker may have been an acquaintance or someone very close to Rocio. After collecting evidence, the police conducted further interviews. First, they questioned Rocio's boyfriend, Antonio Hurat, who was the last person to see her alive and was supposed to see her that night. He gave an alibi, saying he had fallen asleep at home and had not attended the fair that day. The police also questioned all of Rocio's relatives and friends, but each had a solid alibis. A year after Rocio Waninkoff's death, the police had narrowed down the number of suspects, and by the end of that year, they had identified a prime suspect, Dolores Vasquez. There was no evidence against Dolores, but the media led people to believe that Dolores was guilty. Dolores was the lover of Alicia, Rocio's mother. Unfortunately, journalists distorted and even fabricated the story, claiming that Alicia had accused Dolores from the first day after Rocio's death. In reality, their relationship had ended 4 years before the crime. The investigation followed the media story, focusing only on Dolores and creating a motive in the case. People speculated that Rocio may have interfered with the romantic relationship between the two. Many believed that if Rocio had not intervened, Alicia would have returned to Dolores. It was implied that Dolores had acted out of revenge against Rocio. The media and public were quick to accuse Dolores of murder when she was arrested, although she did not confess to any of the crimes. The local community was certain of her guilt, largely because police suspected that the killer was someone close to Rocio. Family members described Dolores as aggressive, violent, and extremely jealous. Alicia, meanwhile, told reporters that Dolores was both vengeful and cruel. Dolores was widely criticized by the public. Her unconventional lifestyle was a target during the trial, as it was considered unusual in Spain. The media portrayed her as a violent and cold-blooded woman who had spent 4 years plotting her hate crimes. The trial attracted a large crowd gathered outside the courthouse. Journalists have widely reported that a close family friend has been charged with Rocio's murder. Dolores is unpopular and faces an uphill battle in court. Public opinion matters in this case. Rumors and sensational media reports are likely to sway the jury's opinion. Virtually every television station has portrayed Dolores Vasquez as responsible for Rocio's death. In reality, there was no evidence against Dolores. However, it seemed that the justice system felt the need to convict someone and chose her as a scapegoat due to her questionable alibi and various flaws. Dolores was not present at the crime scene. The tire tracks did not match her car, the fabric fibers found did not come from her clothes, and the fingerprints on the trash bags did not belong to her. She also had an alibi, stating that she was babysitting her sick mother and her young niece that day, but this was ignored. Over 50 witnesses were called to testify in court. Dolores only took the stand once and stated that she did not kill Rocio and that she did not even see her that day. She asked all of Spain to find the real culprit because it was not her, and that person could have been in the courtroom at the time. She stated that there was no evidence against her and never would be because she was innocent. It is noted that the judicial system in Spain is often criticized for being inadequate and often bending the law. Prosecutors and police in Spain focus on prioritizing their theories over justice, showing a complete disregard for the legal process. The police report highlighted circumstantial evidence linking Dolores to the crime and included a psychological profile of her, as there was no physical evidence. Ultimately, the jury found Dolores Vasquez guilty of murder, resulting in a 16-year prison sentence. The verdict was met with public celebration. Rocio's funeral drew a large crowd. During this time, the Rocio family and the local community felt a growing sense of fear. This atmosphere of fear was amplified by the numerous television programs that covered the case. After Dolores's arrest, the Rocio family appeared on various programs, sharing past stories that described Dolores as cold, unfriendly, demanding, and cruel. It took years and another similar crime to reveal that Rocio Waninkoff was not killed by Dolores Vasquez. On the morning of August 15, 2003, the parents of 17-year-old Sonia Carabantes reported her missing to the police. Sonia's friends said they had dropped Sonia off at her home, but she was not there. A short distance from her home, near a tree, her parents discovered her shoes, purse, and cell phone, along with traces of blood on nearby cars. The police quickly began searching for and investigating Sonia's case. As time went on, the family's despair deepened. They searched the neighborhood, but the bloodstains on Sonia's clothes left little hope that she would be returned safely. A key piece of evidence in Sonia's case was the car's headlights. The police contacted all local auto repair shops to find a car with a broken headlight matching the description. At the same time, the police found many similarities between Rocio's and Sonia's cases. Both girls had disappeared during the fair. All employees working at the fairs in Coin and Motril were investigated, as was the case with Rocio. Flyers with Sonia's picture were widely distributed, and many people actively participated in the search for her. They not only volunteered their time, but also provided any assistance needed to help the police. Police continued their investigation. However, on the 5th day after Sonia went missing, search dogs led them to Sonia's body, which was hidden in a creek under a pile of rocks. Heavy rains the night before had washed away any evidence that could help identify her attacker. On the day of her disappearance, Sonia had been at a fair in Coin. She had said goodbye to her friends near her home, where she was then attacked. Her attacker struck her multiple times, leaving her unconscious and defenseless due to the sudden and violent nature of the attack. The attacker then abducted her by car to a remote area away from her home. Sonia suffered both internal and external injuries before being strangled, ultimately resulting in her death. Sonia was found quickly, allowing police to gather and analyze crucial evidence from her body. Colonel Paca Gabella announced that significant evidence was discovered, including biological material. This was analyzed and added to the police forensic DNA database, leading to matches with genetic material found on a cigarette butt from the Rocio Waninkoff case. When comparing the two DNA samples, they were identical. This revealed that the man who killed Rocio in 1999 was the same individual who attacked Sonia. This suggests that Dolores Vasquez, who was wrongly convicted, while the real killer is still at large, took the life of another young girl. The evidence is clear: an English cigarette butt from Roccio's case and the skin particles found under Sonia's fingernails, all linked to the same offender. On September 18, Cecilia Pantoja, a young woman, contacted the police with suspicions about her ex-husband after seeing blood on his t-shirt just days after Sonia's body was found. Cecilia also mentioned that her ex-husband was away from home twice, driving somewhere on the day of the attack on Roccio. With the help of DNA testing and Cecilia's testimony, the police were able to identify the real killer of both Roccio and Sonia as Tony Alexander King. Tony's criminal activities began as a teenager in the Holloway area of North London. In 1985, the area was hit by a series of violent attacks on women, where victims were strangled and assaulted. At the time, Tony went by his birth name, Anthony Bramwit, then 19, was convicted of strangling 5 women until they were unconscious, using a rope or cable, and then assaulting them. The judge sentenced Tony to 10 years in prison, calling him a monster for his actions. Tony served only half of his sentence and was released in 1991. But he returned to prison shortly afterwards for robbing a woman and threatening her with a knife. He changed his name to Tony Alexander King in search of a new life, married Cecilia Pantoja, and tried to have a normal family life. They had a daughter together, but Tony soon returned to his old ways. A month after Sonia's death, he was arrested. During questioning, Tony admitted to killing 2 innocent girls. After his arrest, he recounted that he followed Roccio as she walked home from her boyfriend's house and threatened her with a knife when she tried to escape. Roccio was attacked with a knife in the neck, and Tony then stabbed her 9 times. In 2005, Tony Alexander King was sentenced to 36 years in prison for kidnapping, assault, and murder of Sonia. The court also ordered Tony to pay her family about $350,000. Tony was also sentenced to 7 years in prison for intentionally causing violence against a woman in Malaga in 2001. The following year, Tony was convicted of Roccio's murder and received an additional 19-year sentence. Before the trial, Tony wrote to Sonia and Roccio's mother, begging for their forgiveness. He is currently serving his sentence at Herrera de la Mana Maximum Security Prison in Ciudad Real, Spain. After the case was over, a huge scandal broke out in Spain because the innocent Dolores Vasquez was wrongly convicted of the murder of Roccio Waninkoff. It is hard to accept that not only can the police and the courts unfairly punish innocent people, but society can also judge and degrade them harshly. Even when a person can prove their innocence, they are still not recognized. It took more than a year to confirm that Dolores Vasquez was telling the truth and that she was completely innocent. In 2008, the Spanish Ministry of Justice offered Dolores Vasquez 120,000 euros in compensation, significantly less than the 4 million euros she had originally requested. Despite her wrongful conviction, Dolores never received an apology from the police. After being released from prison, Dolores returned to the UK. Now, more than 20 years later, Dolores has yet to receive an apology for her conviction, nor has she received any compensation since her case was closed in 2014. She works for a transport company in East London and has undergone a psychological assessment following her traumatic experience. She recently said she is still waiting for an apology after suffering from anxiety for years, which has made it difficult for her to communicate with others. The case of Dolores Vasquez, who was wrongfully imprisoned, is considered one of the most serious miscarriages of justice in Spain since 1910. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Carrie Ann Jopek. Carrie Ann Jopek was born on August 17, 1968, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a large city with a population of over 500,000. Her parents, Carolyn and Robert, divorced when she was very young. Shortly after, her mother remarried a man named Frederick Toussaint. The family lived in downtown Milwaukee along with 2 daughters, the youngest of whom was named Maggie. Carrie grew up in a loving family and had a close relationship with Frederick, whom she considered her biological father. She did not know of her biological father's existence, as he did not communicate with her. Carrie was well educated and had everything she needed. She was friendly and kind, which helped her make many friends, including older teenagers. However, during her teenage years, Carrie's personality began to change, leading to conflicts with her mother and stepfather. When she discovered that Frederick was not her biological father, she became very angry with her parents. She often used this information against him in arguments. Some relatives described Carrie as stubborn, while others thought she was simply going through a challenging period in her life, especially since she was only 13 years old at the time. On March 15, 1982, Carrie was allowed by her parents to stay overnight at her friend Marcia's house. Since both girls were in 7th grade, they went to school together the next morning, March 16. However, because they were in different classes, they could only see each other at lunchtime. Carrie was upset because her teacher had reprimanded her for arguing with another student who had spilled paint on her. The teacher then contacted Carrie's parents to report Carrie's behavior and truancy. The teachers suggested that Carrie's mother pick her up after school to discuss her actions. However, Carrie's house was close enough to the school, so her mother allowed Carrie to walk home by herself. Carrie was upset. She knew her mother and stepfather would probably scold her, so she didn't want to go home. Her friend comforted her, and they parted ways after school. Although reluctant, Carrie had to go home because she lived only a few blocks from school. Normally, it would only take her 3 minutes to walk home, but that day, she never returned. It is important to note that the 1980s in America were generally a safe time. People trusted each other, and crime rates were low compared to today. Additionally, the incident occurred in a crowded area where everyone knew each other, so no one thought it was strange for a 13-year-old girl to walk home from school alone. Carrie did not come home. Carolyn waited for her at home and then went out to look for her. Carolyn thought that Carrie had stopped to visit a friend on the way home and would be back soon. It is important to note that they could not contact Carrie because cell phones had not yet been invented. As the night wore on, Carolyn grew increasingly concerned. She set out again to look for her daughter. First, she went to see Carrie's best friend, Robin, who lived across the street. Unfortunately, no one in Robin's house had seen or heard from Carrie since school ended. Next, Carolyn contacted Marsh, who had spent the night with Carrie. However, Marsh did not see Carrie after she left. Eager to help, Carrie's friends joined the search and began checking with neighbors and classmates who might have seen her after school, but no one had any information. By 11 p.m., a search party of local volunteers who knew the family was formed. Many neighbors, friends, and acquaintances took to the streets to patrol the area and ask questions. Unfortunately, they could not find any information about the Carrie. They decided to wait for Carrie until the next morning. On March 17, when the girl still had not returned home, Carolyn went to the police station to report her missing. By then, the Carrie had been missing for almost a day, prompting police to act quickly, as the situation could be serious. Initially, the primary theory was that Carrie had run away, as she was known to be a difficult teenager who sometimes skipped classes and often spent the night at friends' houses. Police thought that Carrie was simply spending time with friends. However, after interviewing all her friends, they realized this was not the case. None of them had seen Carrie after school, leading them to conclude that something must have happened to her on her way home. They then began questioning residents living along her route that day, But these inquiries yielded no useful information. None of the residents had seen Carrie or noticed anything unusual. The police discovered that Carrie had been upset with her family after learning that her stepfather was not her biological father. Police believed this revelation might have driven her to search for her biological father, whom she could have gone to see that day. By this time, a day had passed since Carrie left school, and there was still no news about her. The police located her biological father, Robert, who lived in a different area of Malak, hoping she might be with him. Unfortunately, when they contacted him, their hopes were dashed. Robert explained that he had been at work all day the previous day and had not seen Carrie. A thorough inspection was carried out at the house of the Carrie. Police searched through all her belongings for clues, but found nothing significant. Consequently, the search for the missing person continued. A day after her disappearance, there was still hope that the teenager was alive. However, the critical window for finding a missing person is 48 hours, after which the chances of a successful rescue decrease significantly. Therefore, the police needed to act quickly. During the investigation, the police focused on Johns, who lived just a few houses away from Carrie's family. John was 17 at the time and had developed a close relationship with Carrie. The police learned that he had a rebellious personality and a history of legal trouble, including convictions for petty theft and selling marijuana. Despite their 4-year age difference, John showed an interest in Carrie, which raised concerns. The police decided to investigate further and brought John in for questioning. John adamantly denied any involvement in Carrie's disappearance, claiming that he had not even seen her that day. The police were unable to gather any useful information during their questioning, and there was no solid evidence against John. As a result, he was released. The police then turned their attention to her stepfather, Frederick. In these cases, the perpetrator was often someone close to the victim, and cases involving stepfathers were not uncommon, which added to their interest in him. The police looked closely at her family, especially the relationship between Carrie and Frederick. They discovered that the two had recently been fighting, a change from their previous relationship. Frederick attributed the turmoil to Carrie's adolescence, believing that her hormones had made her more irritable and prone to anger over small matters. Despite this, he maintains that he would never harm her. An anonymous witness reported some details regarding her stepfather, Frederick. They mentioned that the day after Carrie went missing, Frederick poured a new concrete slab in the backyard. The witness suggested that this may have been Frederick's way of disposing of the body by burying it underneath the concrete slab. This information seems suspicious and should be investigated. The concrete slab was examined using ground-penetrating radar, and no suspicious voids were detected. When the area beneath the slab was excavated, it was found to be empty. The yard was well maintained, showing no signs of recent digging. The police decided to conduct a second round of questioning with the Carrie's friends, focusing on the possibility that she might have run away with a boyfriend. Although Carrie never mentioned having a boyfriend to her parents, the police speculated that she may have kept this relationship secret. However, her friends firmly denied this possibility, insisting that Carrie was not in a relationship with anyone. The police tried to collect evidence, but it is important to note that forensic science in the 1980s was not as advanced as it is today. At that time, there was no DNA testing, trackable cell phones, cameras, or GPS technology. This made finding evidence more difficult. As a result, the police could not find any clues. Carrie seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Lack of evidence then caused the case to stall. The police did not have a strong motive for Carrie's abduction, nor could they find a suspect. To raise public awareness of their daughter's disappearance, Carrie's parents turned to the media for help. They appealed to anyone with information about Carrie to come forward, but still, no leads came. The investigation was stalled due to lack of evidence. More than a year later, on September 2, 1983, a mysterious body was found in the John family home. The contractor was repairing the back porch. He leveled the ground and dug up a significant amount of dirt. While doing so, he noticed a foul odor coming from a pile of disturbed dirt. Upon inspection, he discovered human remains. The contractor immediately called the police. Everyone believed the remains to be those of Carrie. The body was then subjected to dental records analysis to determine the identity of the remains. All members of John's family were questioned. During his police interview, John denied any involvement and requested a lawyer. A year earlier, the police had lacked substantial evidence to charge or detain him, so they released him but continued to view him as a suspect. The remaining members of John's family have denied any involvement in the murder. The medical examiner investigated Carrie's cause of death and discovered severe injuries to her head and neck. She had significant internal bleeding with lacerations on her left side. These injuries suggested that she had been attacked by someone else, leading to the case being classified as a homicide. Unfortunately, the autopsy was unable to provide enough information to determine whether rape had occurred. Carrie's body was found in her friend John's backyard, but this does not mean that he was responsible for her death or that he buried her there. Witnesses said that on the day she disappeared, there was a party at John's house. Police had to piece together the case from scratch, with few clues to follow. And so much time had passed since the party that it was difficult for those who were there to remember what happened. Several teenagers were interviewed about the party at John's house. Some claimed they were there but could not remember any details. Others said they had only heard about the party and were not actually there. John claimed he did not organize any events that day, and police found no evidence to contradict his statement. 4 days after Carrie's body was discovered, police received a new lead. A witness identified Jose Ferreira, a 16-year-old boy who lived next door to Carrie. He was seen in John's backyard when Carrie's body was discovered, which raised some suspicion. The police decided to pursue the lead and invited Jose to the police station for questioning. Jose denied any involvement in Carrie's death or disappearance. Jose knew her well and was friends with her, so he was very upset when he discovered her body in the backyard. He claimed that he did it to honor his old friend. Jose's story seemed credible. He was also questioned about a party at John's house on the day Carrie went missing, but he said it never happened. The police had no evidence against Jose, so they had to release him after questioning. Friends described Jose as friendly and cheerful, and no one believed he would hurt Carrie. They spent a lot of time together and were close friends. The investigation continued, but no leads were found. The case hit a dead end. It wasn't until 33 years after Carrie's murder that the investigation made any progress. On October 11, 2015, a man contacted a journalist to confess to the murder. His name was Jose Ferreira. In addition to contacting the journalist, he called the hotline and admitted to killing 13-year-old Carrie Ann Jopek years earlier. He also confessed to his wife about the crime. Journalists and switchboard operators were stunned by his confession and immediately notified the police. At the same time, Jose's wife learned of his crimes and went to the nearest police station to report him. Jose was 50 years old at the time. The police reviewed the case file. Despite Jose's confession, the police were in no hurry to arrest him. 2 days after his telephone confession, Jose turned himself into the police station and gave a detailed account of the events of 33 years ago. His sudden actions and confession were because he believed it would prevent his wife from getting a divorce. This statement puzzled the police. Jose said that on the day of the incident. Carrie returned home from school. She noticed a party going on at John's house. She wanted to avoid going home where she would face punishment, so she decided to join the party. At the party, she met Jose and they engaged in conversation. Then they went down to the basement together to find some wine. On the way down to the basement, he kissed her and she agreed. As they walked down the stairs to the basement, Carrie suddenly changed her mind and said she wanted to leave. In a fit of rage, he pushed her, causing her to lose her balance and fall down the stairs, resulting in a broken neck. In a moment of loss of control, he raped her, not knowing that she had died from the fall. His actions were classified as sexual assault and use of force. He defended himself by claiming that he had loved Carrie. He felt offended by her decision to leave, but he insisted that he did not want her to die. He panicked and dismissed the incident as an accident. Jose feared going to jail and ruining his life. He seized the opportunity during a lively party when no one noticed his presence in the basement. He needed to dispose of the body quickly to avoid being seen. Jose hid the body, and when night fell, he took a shovel and dragged Carrie into the backyard. In the dark, he quietly dug a hole and buried her. He believed that his plan had gone smoothly and that no one had seen him. However, the police were baffled by his story. They found it hard to believe that at such a crowded party, no one had noticed them together, and no one had noticed him digging the hole and burying Carrie. The police suspected that Jose might have had an accomplice, but he adamantly denied that anyone else was involved. Carrie's family said that Jose often visited them and was present at the farewell and burial. Carrie's mother remembered that Jose had mentioned being haunted by Carrie's ghost, which surprised them, but they ignored it at the time. While this could have been a warning sign, no one thought that the killer could be one of the friendly people in the neighborhood. Jose later revealed that Carrie's spirit had haunted him for years, making it impossible for him to live a normal life. This ultimately contributed to his decision to confess to the crime to ease his conscience. During the trial, the prosecutor asked for Jose to be convicted of second-degree murder. The defense argued that the case was manslaughter. Initially, bail was set at $200,000, but Jose then began to recant his confession. The prosecution's case relied heavily on Jose's confession. It would have been difficult to convince the jury of his guilt without any evidence. Ultimately, the prosecution offered a plea deal. In March 2017, Jose Ferreira agreed to plead guilty to sexually assaulting Carrie, which reduced his prison sentence to 7 years. The final sentence was handed down 35 years after Carrie was murdered. In 2022, Jose was released from prison and moved to the nearby town of Glendale, Wisconsin. He was listed in a police database as a potential sex offender and placed on supervision. Carrie's family expressed outrage that the man who murdered and raped a 13-year-old girl was released after only 7 years. He now lives a quiet life, as if nothing had happened, and as if he had not taken an innocent life. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case, the case of Stay Family. Family massacre cases always leave the public shocked and heartbroken, not only because of their brutality, but also due to the surprising nature of the tragedy occurring in places that seem the safest. Among the most shocking cases in the history of American justice is the Stay Family case, a tragedy that claimed 6 innocent lives and exposed the dark side of domestic violence and human psychology. Through this heartbreaking story, the courage and resilience of Cassidy Stay, the sole survivor, shine as a glimmer of hope amid the darkness of tragedy. A teenage girl answered the door when someone knocked. She found a delivery man waiting outside and informed him that her parents were not home, asking him to return later. Later, the courier came back, but this time, the situation took a turn for the worse. The Stay family lived in that house. The father, 39-year-old Stephen Stay, and his wife, 33-year-old Katie Stay. They had 5 children, 15-year-old Cassidy, 13-year-old Brian, 9-year-old Emily, 7-year-old Rebecca, and 4-year-old Zach. They were a close-knit and happy family, well known among their neighbors for their Christmas parties and Halloween celebrations. The Stay family lived in a comfortable and safe neighborhood in Houston, Texas. Stephen had been working in real estate for many years and had just started his own small agency. Katie was a dedicated housewife who focused on taking care of their children and managing household tasks, always supporting her husband. On July 9, 2014, they visited their grandmother in the morning. Later that afternoon, after returning home, Katie and Stephen went to the bank, leaving their daughter Cassidy in charge of her younger siblings. A knock sounded at the door. Cassidy opened it and saw a courier from a delivery service holding a package. She informed him that her parents were not home. Cassidy didn't see the courier's face clearly, so she asked him to come back later and shut the door. After a while, the courier returned. When she opened the door again, she repeated that her parents were not home yet. This time, she looked closely at his face and recognized him. It was Ronald Lee Haskell, her Aunt Melanie Lyon's ex-husband, who was 33 years old. When Ronald saw that Cassidy recognized him, he told her he wanted to see Melanie. Cassidy replied that Melanie was not home. Worried, she tried to quickly close the door, but this made Ronald angry. He kicked the door hard, causing Cassidy to fall to the floor. He forced his way into the house and pulled out a gun. Instead of a package, he had a folded blanket, which he planned to use as a silencer. The children were terrified, clinging to each other and pleading with Ronald to leave, but he ignored their pleas. He held them hostage while waiting for Stephen and Katie to come back. When Katie returned from the bank and entered the house, Ronald confronted them with a weapon, demanding to know where Melanie was. They refused to answer because they knew he was dangerous. That was why Melanie had divorced him, and she was hiding. Ronald took their mobile phones and ordered them to lie face down on the floor. Realizing the danger, Katie jumped up and screamed, "No!" But then, he attacked her in the face and proceeded to target each family member on the floor, aiming for the back of their heads, including the children. Zach also was shot in the shoulder. The boy got up and ran to his father, who had already been shot. Ronald approached and callously attacked Zach in the head. When it was Cassidy's turn, the bullet unexpectedly ricocheted off her head without Ronald noticing. Seeing what had happened, she lay still and silent. Ronald, believing everyone was dead, decided to leave. He grabbed the keys to the Honda parked nearby and drove away with the Stay family's car. Once he was gone, Cassidy called 911. She informed them that Ronald had shot her entire family and that everyone was dead except for her and her brother, who she could hear struggling to breathe. The police and ambulance arrived at the scene to find a horrific sight inside the house. 6 individuals were lying on the floor, hands behind their heads, in a large pool of blood. At this time, all 6 were deceased. Cassidy was the only survivor. She suffered a minor head injury, received treatment, and fully recovered. She then moved in with her maternal grandparents and was able to share the details of the brutal murder. Cassidy informed the police that Ronald had been stalking her aunt, Melanie, and harassing the entire her family. She believed that Ronald had gone to her grandparents' house, where her aunt Melanie lived. Meanwhile, the police discovered that Ronald had fled the crime scene in the Stay family's Honda, which was now considered a wanted vehicle. It was urgent to locate this dangerous criminal before he could hurt anyone else. As the police headed to Melanie's house, they spotted the Honda. Ronald's driveway was blocked, and he stopped the car, but he refused to exit. Instead, he threatened to self-harm. Surrounding him were 50 police officers, all armed, demanding that he get out of the vehicle. In response, Ronald claimed to be struggling with mental health issues and insisted on speaking with his brother, who lived in California, stating that he did not want to go to prison. Negotiations lasted 3 hours until Ronald finally exited the car. He was arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder. As a result of the murders of the Stay family, the death penalty was being considered for Ronald, who remained in jail without bail after being released from the hospital. Cassidy, along with her grandfather and uncle, attended a family memorial event where 600 colorful balloons were released. She quoted her favorite Harry Potter book saying, "Happiness can be found even in the darkest times if only you remember to turn on the light." Cassidy expressed her belief that her parents, Brian, Emily, Rebecca, and Zach, were in a better place and that she would see them again one day. She also mentioned that she is staying strong during this challenging time. The police started investigating Ronald's background and found multiple charges of domestic violence made by his ex-wife, Melanie. He and Melanie were married in California in 2002 after having known each other since elementary school. They moved from their hometown to Utah, where Ronald deliberately cut Melanie off from her family. Problems arose almost immediately after their wedding, as he manipulated her into feeling unwanted by everyone, including her relatives. Throughout their marriage, Ronald subjected Melanie to physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. They had 4 children together, and he even assaulted Melanie during her pregnancies, eventually directing his violence towards the children as well. Ronald had a low income as a courier, which made it difficult to support their large family. Despite their financial struggles, he did not allow Melanie to work or leave the house, isolating her from anyone who could help. In 2008, Melanie seized a chance to contact the police when Ronald accidentally left his phone unattended after physically assaulting her. She was taken to the hospital, and Ronald received an 8-month suspended sentence. Unfortunately, this punishment did not stop him. The abuse started again as soon as she returned home. Ronald grew even more aggressive and threatened to kill her family if she reported him again, causing her to live in constant fear. By 2013, Melanie could no longer tolerate her situation. She and her children left their home while Ronald was at work and sought safety in a shelter. She filed for divorce and obtained a restraining order against Ronald. In need of support, she reached out to her sister, Katie. Despite not being very close, Katie felt compelled to help her sister and took Melanie and her 4 children to their parents' house in Houston, Texas, where they would be safe. Melanie's divorce from Ronald was finalized on February 14, 2014. They were granted joint custody of the children, with Melanie receiving primary custody. Ronald was ordered to pay $700 a month in alimony from his modest income. After the divorce, Ronald moved in with his parents in California. He was ordered to stay away from Melanie, her family, and the children's school. To evaluate his emotional stability and communication skills with the children, he was required to undergo a psychological examination, but he never succeeded. While living with his parents, Ronald began to take out his frustrations on them, physically abusing his elderly parents and older sister. In a disturbing incident, when he learned that his mother had been in contact with Melanie, he attacked her, bound her to a chair, and choked her until she lost consciousness. His sister eventually discovered their mother and called the police, but Ronald managed to avoid serious repercussions and continued the abuse towards his family. Ronald's family found it hard to understand why he had become so cruel, especially given that he was raised in a loving environment. In school, he was a popular football player, crowned prom king, and had many female friends. No one could believe that the friendly and cheerful Ronald would turn into a violent person. And in a moment of anger, Ronald sought revenge on his ex-wife. Tragically, he ended up killing his stay's family instead. The police was discovered that Ronald did not own any registered firearms. He had stolen a pistol from his ex-girlfriend and bought over 200 rounds of ammunition from a weapons store. A ballistic test confirmed that the pistol found with him matched the bullets found at the murder scene. Additionally, notes outlining his murder plans were discovered in his notebook, showing that he originally intended to kill Melanie, her parents, and her sister as part of his revenge. It is clear that Ronald had planned this horrific act and intended to kill many people. If Cassidy had not quickly called 911 and the police had not intervened, Ronald would have killed Melanie, her parents, and possibly others. A memorial was set up in front of the deceased family's home, where neighbors and community members brought flowers to honor their memory. Melanie did feel guilty for her ex-husband's actions and found it difficult to understand why he chose to kill Katie and Katie's family instead of her. At this time, the court was significantly affected by damage caused by a storm, resulting in a delay in the trial. It wasn't until August 25, 2019, that the trial finally started, with Ronald facing the death penalty. Ronald fainted during the proceedings and had to be placed in a wheelchair. His lawyer claimed that he was scared and required a mental health assessment. A psychiatric evaluation revealed changes in his behavior, and he was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. The psychiatrist believed he was pretending to have a mental illness to evade responsibility for his actions. Ronald had previously been diagnosed with depression and bipolar disorder while living with his parents and had attempted suicide 3 times without success. Ronald confessed to killing Stay's family, but said that voices in his head urged him to do it. He claimed he wasn't aware of his actions at the time. However, the prosecution presented CCTV footage showing Ronald at a hotel, a store, and a cinema before the murder. In the footage, he appeared calm and rational, which suggested he was not insane. The defendant's brother stated that Ronald was extremely angry with Katie, who aided Melanie and the children in their escape. He wanted to take revenge on her. Melanie corroborated this by saying he had been stalking her and had threatened to kill the entire her family. Notes found in his notebook indicated that he had been planning these actions for several months, showing that this was not a result of sudden insanity. In court, Cassidy also was the key witness against Ronald. She had grown up significantly and was a student at the University of Brick-Mayanka in Utah, where she was also engaged to her boyfriend. Cassidy recounted the terrifying experiences she had in the house during the murder and was shocked that Ronald showed no remorse for his actions. Throughout the 5 years he spent in prison awaiting trial, he did not reflect on his crime or feel any regret. Ronald was found guilty and sentenced to death by lethal injection. He is currently on death row waiting for his execution. The Stay family massacre is not only a tragic loss, but also a profound reminder of the impact of domestic violence and the dangers of leaving mental health issues untreated. Although the pain Cassidy Stay endured is immeasurable, she chose to use her loss as motivation to spread a message of courage and mental strength. The Stay family's story not only reminds us of the importance of protecting our loved ones, but it also inspires each person to feel a sense of responsibility to the community in preventing and resolving violence. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Rosalia Jara. Rosalia Daniela Jara was born on September 12, 1997 in Fort Ole, a small town in the Vera department of Santa Fe, Argentina. She grew up in a close-knit family with limited means. Her mother, Liliana Jara, was the head of the family. Rosalia spent her childhood and adolescence in Fortin, where she attended primary school in a neighborhood called San Jose Obre. She aspired to become either a teacher or a police officer. She is known to be kind and thoughtful, especially to her family. When she was in 6th grade, she met Juan Oscar Valdez, a teacher, and they quickly secretly dated each other. At the time, she was only 13 years old, while Juan was 32 and married. Rosalia only shared this relationship with her sister, and her mother only found out when she became pregnant. After Rosalia gave birth to a daughter named Alma, Juan distanced himself and refused to acknowledge Alma's as his child. About a year later, Rosalia began living with a man named Aldo. There was a large age difference between them. This relationship did not go very well, and after another conflict, they decided to break up. On Saturday, July 1, 2017, Rosalia visited her mother Liliana, asking her to take care of her 2-year-old daughter, Alma. After that, Rosalia left home, taking very few belongings. Liliana assumed that Rosalia would be back soon, but that was not the case. That evening, Rosalia wears a red sports jacket, blue jeans, and new pink sneakers. Rumor has it that she went out to play cards with the US $20 she borrowed. She claimed she needed to make some money and wanted to try her luck. Around 9:00 p.m., Liliana called Rosalia, who said she was at a bar, enjoying the evening with friends while playing five-card stud poker. She didn't mention anything concerning during their conversation, and this was the last time they spoke. Around 10:00 p.m., Rosalia was seen leaving a bar while talking on her cell phone and heading towards a checkpoint. After midnight, her mother, Liliana, tried repeatedly to reach her, but received no response. The following day, her mother went to the city police station to report her daughter, Rosalia, missing. Liliana found it unusual that she had not returned home, as Liliana knew how much her daughter valued family. However, the police were not interested in what Liliana said and refused to conduct a search. They argued that Rosalia, 19 years old, may have voluntarily left home. Days passed, and local authorities took no action to find Rosalia. A week after she went missing, local feminist groups organized a protest to pressure law enforcement. On the 11th day since she disappearance, authorities finally began search operations in Fort Ole and nearby areas. They conducted a careful search of the area and eventually discovered several items believed to belong to Rosalia. However, these findings did not help them find her. It is worth noting that after Rosalia went missing, most of the authorities' attention was focused on Juan. The police discovered that he left his home around 9 p.m. on July 1, driving a white Toyota Corolla, which partially matched the route Rosalia was believed to have taken. He returned home after 1 a.m. Witnesses near the bar reported seeing a similar white car with tinted windows around that time. Apparently, Juan was aware that the police suspected him of being involved in Rosalia's disappearance, which explains why he damaged his phone right before the authorities confiscated his phone. Rosalia's call history and phone location analysis revealed some important information, data related to Juan. On the night of her disappearance, there were about 20 calls between their two mobile numbers, most of which were initiated by Juan. Additionally, geolocation data from antenna signals indicated that Rosalia's and Juan's phones were close to each other at one point. Additionally, GPS data also showed that Juan's car was in the area during that time. Based on evidence and testimony from several witnesses, Juan was arrested in late July 2017. In early August 2017, the police organized a series of operations to clarify the chronology of incident related to Rosalia's disappearance. A representative of the Ministry of Security confirmed that during these operations, several searches took place simultaneously. One search took place at the local health department, while two others were organized at the homes of several police officers who were later suspected. The main goal of the search at the medical center was to find evidence suggesting that Rosalia may have had an abortion shortly before she went missing. However, this hypothesis was dismissed. Meanwhile, the search for Rosalia, the missing girl, continued. The main suspect, Juan, refused to testify about his relationship with her and about the many calls he made on the day she was last seen. In April 2018, during a hearing in the city of Vera, the judge rejected a request from Juan's lawyer to allow him to remain free. The judge decided that he should remain in custody indefinitely, as there was still a risk that he could influence witnesses. However, Juan's lawyer stated that the prosecution lacked evidence to link he to the crime. The lawyer emphasized that he had been cooperating with authorities from the start. The lawyer also dismissed the prosecution's claim that Juan intentionally damaged his phone to destroy evidence. On August 26, 2018, two hunters discovered human remains near a stream in the city of Londrina. The remains included a skull and several bone fragments. Alongside these, a pink sports jacket, sneakers, and other personal items believed to belong to the victim were found. Rosalia's family identified most of these items. The remains were sent to the Institute of Forensic Medicine for anthropological analysis. Police then went to the home of Aldo, Rosalia's ex-boyfriend, where she had lived prior to her disappearance. With Aldo's permission, they searched the house for a lock that matched a key found in the sports jacket's pocket. However, Aldo explained that he had to break the front door locks because he had not lived there for a long time and didn't know where his keys were. On September 8, 2018, investigative police officers conducted several procedures related to this case. The first procedure took place at the Municipal Health Service Department, where blood samples were taken from Liliana and her granddaughter Alma. The aim is to determine whether their DNA matches that of the remains that have been found. The Argentine Institute of Forensic Medicine confirmed that the remains found belonged to Rosalia, with a nearly 100% probability. Although forensic experts were unable to determine the cause of her death, it was clear that she had been murdered by violence, as evidenced by severe injuries to her left cheekbone, which had destroyed her skull. For Gustavo Monzon, the prosecutor in charge of the case, the evidence collected became a crucial step in the investigation. After completing all procedures, Rosalia's remains were returned to her family for burial. After it was confirmed that she had died from physical abuse, the State Attorney General's office decided to change the crime classification to homicide. More than a year and a half after her disappearance, the case finally moved to the public trial stage. In 2018, Juan Valdez was charged with Rosalia's murder. His lawyer has objected to this, arguing that the actual reasons for Rosalia's death were not determined. After hearing this, the court ordered the exhumation of her remains for further examination. Several months later, the original judge was dismissed due to allegations of bias against Juan. On July 2, 2019, the new judge began reviewing the case and denied Juan's attorney's request to revoke the pretrial detention order. Local media have been regularly reporting on key points in the investigation. In particular, Attorney General Gustavo Monzon has suggested that Juan killed Rosalia simply because she asked for child support for Alma, whom Juan acknowledged as his child. Gustavo claimed that just a day before Rosalia's disappearance, she had called Juan to voice her frustrations about his refusal to help with child support. Returning to the trial, it is important to clarify the prosecution's main hypothesis. On Saturday, July 1, 2017, while Juan's wife was away, he contacted Rosalia to discuss their meeting. As previously mentioned, he and she had multiple phone calls that day, with the last call initiated by Juan. This call lasted no more than 30 seconds, but it was enough for he to specify the exact time and place for their meeting. It is believed that when he met she, he used force to make her get into his car and turned off her mobile phone. From that moment on, her phone no longer had a signal. According to the timeline created by the prosecutors, Juan drove towards the municipality of Landry. At some point during the drive, he allegedly struck Rosalia on the head, leading to her death. He then drove a few more kilometers to a stream to dispose of her body. During the hearing, the prosecutor presented all the evidence related to the case. In addition to the report from the experts of the Institute of Forensic Medicine, the prosecution had witness testimony, autopsy reports, DNA analysis results, and forensic reports. The case documents include information from telephone company, such as call records, text messages, and geolocation information. This information fully corroborates the main version of the prosecution. Additionally, the prosecutor's team had testimony from Juan's 20-year-old stepdaughter, Macarena. She said that Juan left home around 9 p.m. that night, and she did not see him return. This contradicts Juan's testimony, which states that on the day of the incident, he went to bed early and did not leave the house. Another piece of indirect evidence presented by the prosecution was related to Juan's inappropriate behavior towards teenage girls. This evidence was based on the testimony of a female student. She reported that he had subjected her to indecent acts when she was just 12 years old. Additionally, there was other evidence that Juan had problems at the school, where he occasionally taught, all related to his relationships with minors. In November 2019, Rosalia's family changed their lawyer. By March 2020, their new lawyer, Caroline Walker, stated that after reviewing the case documents, she discovered that the investigation had overlooked several important elements. Curiously, Juan was not prosecuted for sexually assaulting Rosalía, even though their romantic relationship started long before she turned 18. Caroline also realized that as she gathered evidence against Juan, he was clearly a dangerous predator. For this reason, she did not rule out the possibility of future cases related to these crimes. The main trial took place at the Vera Municipal Court on Tuesday, July 7, 2020. This was 3 years after the disappearance and 2 years after the discovery of Rosalía's remains. Only the main representatives of the parties attended the trial. Other members, journalists, and many experts were in other rooms of the court. Given the case's significance and the announced restrictions, various feminist groups supporting Rosalía's family requested authorities to broadcast the trial daily. In his opening speech, Prosecutor Gustavo stated that he would seek a life sentence for Juan. There were several reasons for this decision, the most important of which was that Rosalía had been in an unequal relationship with him. Juan not only controlled her, but also dominated her in social relationships. Furthermore, he has consistently failed to acknowledge their common child, Alma. Therefore, the punishment Gustavo proposed, that is, life imprisonment, was entirely appropriate to the extent of the damage Juan had caused to all members of Rosalía's family. Caroline Walker, the lawyer representing Rosalía's family, criticized the authorities for their initial response when Rosalía was reported missing. She noted that the authorities were initially not proactive in searching for Rosalía and did not take the case seriously. Additionally, she stressed that Rosalía's remains were not discovered by law enforcement officers, but were found by 2 hunters. She also said that in her opinion, a police officer informed Juan about the investigation. This led to some important information being leaked, which could have helped him disappear just before his arrest. The trial lasted about a month and featured around 100 expert testimonies. Details of the phone calls between Rosalía and Juan on the day of her disappearance were also presented. It was revealed that he made the last call shortly after she left the bar, and her phone was turned off soon after. Several witnesses reported seeing a similar white car near the bar that evening. Juan was also seen leaving the house around 9:00 p.m., and a while later he came back. Prosecutors argued that this brief time frame was sufficient for him to commit the crime and dispose of the evidence. Additionally, another important piece of evidence was geolocation data from the phones, which showed that Juan and Rosalía's phones were in close proximity for a period of time. The prosecution delivered a strong closing argument, presenting both direct and indirect evidence that confirmed Juan Valdez's guilt in the crime. They firmly believed that Rosalía's life was ended due to a violent act by he, although the exact cause of death was not determined. But forensic experts believed that she could have died from a severe blow to the left cheekbone. Juan also had the opportunity to defend himself. He attempted to dispute all the evidence presented by the authorities, particularly denying allegations that he intentionally damaged his mobile phone. Furthermore, Juan argued that the authorities had made a serious mistake by focusing on him, which had led to a failure to identify who had actually harmed Rosalía. On August 3, 2020, the much-awaited verdict was announced. The court found Juan Oscar Valdez guilty on all charges. He listened to his sentence with his eyes downcast. Outside the courtroom, many young people from various human rights organizations had gathered to show support for Rosalía's family and to follow the trial's progress. Shortly after the guilty verdict, Juan's lawyer filed an appeal against the trial court's decision. During the appeal, Juan's lawyer argued that the prosecution had not presented clear evidence to prove that Rosalía had actually gotten into Juan's car on the day she disappeared. Additionally, the lawyer also argued that Aldo, her last boyfriend, whom she had accused of sexual assault, was the one people should suspect. The defense also stressed that the fact that Juan had a daughter with Rosalía did not prove that he had a motive to commit a serious crime, The prosecution aimed to counter the arguments made by Juan's lawyer. They said that from the beginning of the investigation, they considered many theories, but all were discarded when the evidence pointed to Juan as the perpetrator. Caroline Walker, the lawyer representing Rosalia's family, agreed with the prosecution's position. On October 7, 2021, the Vera Court of Appeals issued a unanimous 3-judge decision. They did not accept the appeal and request to overturn the sentence that Juan's lawyer had filed. Therefore, the previous judgment of the trial court, according to which Juan was sentenced to life in prison, remained in place. In addition, the prosecutor's office was asked to conduct an internal investigation into the misconduct of some of the police officers involved. Rosalia's case became a symbol of solidarity and feminist movements in the northern province of Santa Fe. It highlighted the issue of gender violence in local media and sparked discussions during political debates. Although Rosalia's family achieved justice, it did not erase their pain. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Megan Emirovich. A young girl's 18th birthday celebration turned into a nightmare. We'll find out in today's video. It took Conrad Emirovich and Julia years to conceive. After unsuccessful attempts to conceive, they sought help at a specialist clinic. Medical professionals ran tests and determined that the couple would never be able to have biological children. The news devastated Conrad, 40, and his 31-year-old wife, Julia, who had always dreamed of a large family. However, they eventually accepted their situation. At that time, they had been married for over 2 years. In 2002, they adopted a baby girl named Megan. Just 3 days after her birth, she was taken away from her biological mother, who was struggling with addiction. Megan was placed in a more stable environment. A few months after adopting 2 children, Julia was surprised to discover that she was pregnant. They considered it a miracle and believed that the child was a blessing from God for their good deeds. Their 3rd child, Morgan, was also their only biological child. Although only one of their 3 children was biological, they loved them all equally. With 3 young children, the couple experienced the challenges of caring for newborns, including the constant need to change diapers. This made them consider starting their own business, as they realized how expensive disposable diapers could be. They created soft cloth diapers. The diapers were highly absorbent, and while Julia made them at home, Conrad worked on marketing the product. Their diapers became quite popular. Conrad worked in information technology at a local IT company. 3 years later, Julia became pregnant again and gave birth to a baby girl named Anne. It turned out that the doctors had made a mistake, and they were able to have a baby after all. During this time, the family lived in Rowland Township, Michigan, a peaceful and cozy area, away from the hustle and bustle of big cities. Conrad began drinking heavily. This put a strain on their relationship, leading to frequent arguments. Finally, in 2011, Julia decided to file for divorce. After the divorce, the couple shared joint custody for the first few years, but the children lived primarily with their mother. When the older children, Austin and Megan, became teenagers, their parents suggested that they choose which parent they wanted to live with. Their mother was quite strict, while their father was more lenient and allowed them to attend parties and invite friends over. Additionally, his new home had more space, so Austin and Megan decided to live with him, thinking they would have more freedom. At first, everything seemed great. The teenagers felt like they were enjoying their newfound freedom. Conrad struggled with his alcoholism and never overcame it. Over time, he drank more heavily and neglected household chores such as cleaning and chores. As a result, the house and yard became increasingly messy. What had once been a comfortable place became an unsuitable environment for the children. Morgan and Anne, who lived with their mother, stopped visiting their father altogether because they were embarrassed to discuss him and did not want to bring friends over. Meanwhile, the eldest son, Austin, began to argue more frequently with Conrad. Austin was frustrated with his father's behavior, but felt powerless to change it. As his resentment grew, it turned into anger, and he even resorted to physical violence when confronting Conrad. One notable incident occurred at a friend's birthday party of Austin's. Conrad arrived drunk and disheveled, which Austin found embarrassing. On another occasion, Conrad attended Austin's graduation drunk and slurring his words. That night, Austin even noticed a foul odor coming from his father. Before he turned 18, Austin began looking for a job so he could move out. He saved enough money to live with friends, which helped him escape the toxic environment at home. As a result, he almost stopped communicating with the rest of his family. Meanwhile, Megan, who chose to live with her father Conrad, was left to do most of the household chores, including laundry, cooking, cleaning, and making sure her father stayed out of trouble. This pressure may have contributed to her developing behavioral problems, which friends and family eventually noticed. Megan began to harbor resentment toward her father, especially after he threatened a teacher with a knife, which led to her being expelled from school. As a result, her father arranged for her to be homeschooled. For reasons unknown, Megan also did not seek help from her mother and had no intention of moving in with her. One day, Conrad was too drunk to take Megan on a business trip, so she took his car without permission and drove away. Unfortunately, Megan got into an accident and crashed the car, but she suffered minimal legal consequences. Meanwhile, Conrad's alcoholism worsened. The family's difficulties left Megan shouldering all the household chores. She was overwhelmed by the myriad of problems, and chaos in the house continued to escalate. One day, Julia came to help clean. However, it took her about 10 hours to clean just one room. When she went down to the basement, she was overwhelmed by the smell of cat urine. She suggested to Megan that they move in together to escape the hardships of living with Conrad, an alcoholic father. But Megan refused. She chose to continue supporting her father, and by 2020, the situation became completely dire. Trash filled the yard, and the house was a mess. During this time, Megan was Conrad's only source of support. Since 2021, he had been experiencing health issues due to long-term alcohol abuse. He would occasionally lose consciousness and have trouble controlling his bladder. Megan stayed close to her father. She felt that she couldn't leave him because she feared he wouldn't survive without her. Despite his drinking, but Conrad was never aggressive. He was actually a nice guy. They would argue, but their conflicts were usually just minor verbal disagreements. In the fall of 2021, Megan is planning to celebrate her 18th birthday. Although her birthday is September 29, she decides to have the party on October 1 after school so all her friends can attend. Conrad agreed to pay for the hotel room for the event, even though he initially objected. On the morning of the holiday, her father, Conrad, was supposed to take her to the hairdresser. However, when Megan woke up, she found him asleep on the couch in the living room. Conrad was drunk and did not respond to her attempts to wake him. Frustrated, Megan yelled that he had disappointed her, to which her father responded with a yell, then rolled over and went back to sleep. Megan became extremely angry and started throwing objects at Conrad. Then she asked a friend to take her to the hair salon. She also took a tearful photo and posted it on social media to express her frustration with the situation. The next morning, Megan took out her dad's bank card, but it wouldn't work when she tried to make a payment. She assumed she had entered the wrong PIN. She tried calling Conrad, but he didn't answer. So she asked her friend Kayla, who lived nearby, to stop by her house and ask Conrad for the PIN. Kayla arrived around 4 p.m. When she walked into the house and greeted Conrad from a distance, she was shocked to see him up close. He was alive, but his body was covered in grotesque sores, his fingers looked burned, and his legs had a greenish tint. Despite his condition, Conrad provided her with the PIN code for his card. Kayla then called Megan to inform her of the situation. Kayla was surprised that Megan heard the situation and remained calm. Megan advised her to ignore her drunken father. Kayla then called Austin, who came to help, and asked Kayla to report what she saw to the police. She called 911 and waited in the driveway for the ambulance. Kayla spent 15 minutes talking to Megan, but Megan did not seem to understand the severity of the situation. The ambulance arrived very quickly, and they took Conrad out of the house. At that moment, Austin arrived with his friend Lucas. Austin asked his father what happened, and his father assured him that everything was fine. When the two young men entered the house, they discovered blood and a white powder on the sofa where their father was lying. Nearby, there was an open bottle of chemicals. It appeared that the powder on their father's body came from this bottle of chemicals. Conrad recalled that his injuries may have been related to Megan throwing several objects at him before she left. However, Megan was not concerned about her father's health. She continued to call Conrad several times, trying to get his PIN, but received no response. Although she had paid for his beauty services, her frustration increased when she still could not reach him. Megan did not understand that her father was facing serious health problems and had been hospitalized. When her friend informed her of this, she misunderstood the situation and thought he was simply drunk. By this point, doctors had assessed Conrad's condition and discovered he had suffered severe chemical burns. Unfortunately, the hospital did not have the equipment necessary to treat such serious injuries, so they considered transferring him to a better-equipped facility. Austin called his mother and asked her to check Conrad's house again, as he needed to stay in the hospital. When Julia arrived, she was once again shocked by the state of the house while searching for a cell phone. During this time, the doctors ran some tests. They found that his blood alcohol level was very high. Despite being in the hospital for a long time, Conrad was still very drunk. It is difficult to imagine what his blood alcohol level was the morning he spoke to Megan. He explained the situation, but did not remember anything and gave inconsistent statements. Before Conrad was taken to the new hospital, 3 police officers spoke with him. They gathered all the information they had, including the suspicion that Megan had used a white powder to intentionally harm her father. While one officer stayed behind to talk to Conrad, the other officers went to look for Megan. Julie informed the officers of the location where Megan was supposed to be celebrating her birthday, and several officers went there. Around 12:15, police spotted a car with several teenagers inside, including Megan. They took her out of the car to ask her some questions about the incident. During questioning, Megan hesitantly confessed that she may have thrown some chemicals at her father. She suggested that she may have accidentally thrown water, which then caused a chemical reaction. As a result, the police had to arrest her and take her to the police station. Conrad allowed police to search his home, where they discovered a bottle of white powder, a highly alkaline product used to clear particularly stubborn blockages. Megan was charged with assault with intent to cause serious bodily injury and 1 count of domestic violence. She was released on $75,000 bail, but she was unable to pay it and remains in jail. Meanwhile, Conrad is in pain in the hospital, and surgeons consider his condition to be serious. They need to treat multiple wounds and remove dead tissue to make way for new skin. Conrad underwent multiple surgeries and suffered from several infections. He also had difficulty speaking, which required a tracheotomy. This was due to his long-term exposure to chemical fumes, which damaged his lungs. He also required dialysis, and his condition continued to deteriorate rapidly. As a result, doctors decided that amputation was necessary. At this point, the Conrad had been suffering for over 5 months, and doctors still couldn't find an effective treatment. Conrad's mental state worsened, and he often requested to be taken off life support to alleviate his pain. More than anything, he wanted to go home. He was eventually discharged and allowed to return home, where some relatives visited him. Unfortunately, just 3 days after coming home, he died due to complications, which occurred on March 6, 2022. Forensic experts determined that his death was caused by poisoning from chemical reagents that harmed his lungs and kidneys. As a result, the charges against Megan were upgraded to murder. She was also charged with the negligent handling of hazardous chemicals that led to his death. The Megan spent nearly 15 months in prison before her trial started. The first hearing took place on June 12, 2023. During the trial, relatives and friends of the Conrad shared their testimonies. Their accounts were similar, which reinforced the credibility of the events being reconstructed. They expressed their belief that Megan did not intentionally kill her father. They emphasized that Megan loved her alcoholic father, Conrad, and took care of him. However, that day, in a fit of anger that he might ruin her birthday, she threw things at him without realizing exactly what she was throwing or the potential consequences of her actions. The prosecution has a different view of the situation. They believe that Megan intentionally collected the chemicals with the intention of harming her father. They argue that this was premeditated rather than impulsive. The prosecution questioned how the Megan could have randomly found the chemicals and water that led to such a reaction. The prosecution believes that Megan poured out the reagents and then added water, which caused the chemical reaction. Megan's defense attorneys countered the allegations. They argued that Conrad was on the wet couch due to a urinary problem and that Megan did not need to throw water at him. They suggested that she may not have even done that, as she seemed uncertain when speaking to the police. They also argued that the chemical could have been thrown accidentally and that Conrad's burns could have been caused by lying on the wet couch. A major problem arose during the trial. When the police initially found a bottle of chemicals, they did not collect fingerprints from the bottle as evidence. This mistake left a significant gap in the evidence, making it difficult for the prosecutor's office to prove exactly what Megan threw at Conrad. It is possible that the chemical was there by accident and not due to any wrongdoing on her part. Additionally, the burns on the Conrad's skin suggested that the alkali was actually rubbed into it. If Megan had done this, she would have been injured as well, but there were no gloves or protective equipment found in the house, and her hands showed no signs of burns. Alkali practically does not react with cold water at room temperature. It takes a long time for it to begin to damage the skin, and only with hot water does it react almost immediately. According to the lawyers, everything indicates that the Megan must have deliberately poured hot water into the bottle and thrown it at her father. However, all the circumstances of the case indicate the opposite, which means that she did not harm her father. After Megan left, there was serious consideration that someone else might have caused Conrad severe injuries. Suspicion fell particularly on Austin due to his odd behavior on the day of the incident and his strained relationship with his father and other family members. On July 15, 2023, a jury found Megan Emirovich guilty, but the final decision rested with the judge, who scheduled a verdict hearing in 10 days. The verdict was controversial. Some believe that Megan intentionally killed her father, while others believe it was a coincidence. Megan herself claimed that she had no idea that mixing certain chemicals with water could lead to someone's death. On July 25, 2023, during a heartfelt speech in her defense, Megan apologized, expressed her longing for her father, and insisted that she never intended to hurt him. Megan admitted that she was unclear about what she had thrown at him. She requested the judge's understanding and support to help her pursue her dreams, which include earning a degree in marine biology and developing programs to assist children with depression, aiming to make a positive impact in the world. The Megan asserted that she does not pose a threat to society. The judge decided to give 15-year-old Megan another chance by sentencing her to just 1 year in prison and 5 years of probation. Megan and her lawyers were pleasantly surprised by this lenient sentence. Her mother and sisters supported her, believing she would start serving her sentence right away. However, she was released because she had already spent more time in jail than her sentence required. The prosecutor's office was unhappy with the verdict and requested that Megan be placed under house arrest, but the court denied this request, allowing her to move freely without any GPS monitoring. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Nicole Pitts. Nicole Pitts was born in late February 1973 and grew up in King County. She attended Eastern Washington College. Every summer, her family traveled to Seattle and spent much of their time at Lake Samash. Nicole had a close relationship with her mother, Gail, and had a good relationship with her father, Rod. In the 1990s, while working at a fitness club, she met her future husband, David. Their relationship quickly developed into a romantic relationship. After spending some time together, they married in 2002 in Maui, Hawaii. In 2005, the couple bought a condominium in Linwood, Washington, a place where they could enjoy their time together. At that time, Linwood was a quiet town with a population of fewer than 40,000 people. It featured narrow streets and many bars and restaurants, similar to their previous home. The young family quickly fell in love with the area. Nicole was outgoing and made friends easily. Within days of moving in, she had made many new friends. She is an animal lover and often walks her dog around the neighborhood or relaxes at home with her 2 cats. She cares for them as if they were her own children. Nicole's career was going well. After finishing school, she worked at a fitness club for a while, before becoming a corporate manager at a mobile phone company. She lived close to where she worked. Nicole was an important member of the team because she easily connected with her colleagues and helped them solve problems. However, she faced challenges from an early age. She was introduced to alcohol as a teenager and eventually became an alcoholic. This started when her parents divorced, which left her feeling lost. Her mother, a flight attendant, was often away on business trips, so Nicole was often left in the care of her elderly grandmother, which led to her hanging out with the wrong crowd. Fortunately, Nicole's parents noticed their daughter's issue early on, and with the support of her family, she was able to overcome her bad habit. They attended Alcoholics Anonymous meetings together, where she received guidance, making her journey easier. However, her alcohol use had lasting effects, resulting in significant health problems. At age 21, Nicole was diagnosed with endometriosis and underwent 3 surgeries. Following these procedures, she was prescribed pain medication to control her chronic pain. By 2006, 32-year-old Nicole had been avoiding alcohol for 8 years. Despite this, she remained an active and valuable member of her Alcoholics Anonymous group. She attended every meeting, viewing them not just as a way to manage her own recovery, but also as an opportunity to support others in their struggles. Nicole understood the challenges of the fight against addiction. From a young age, she had a passion for cooking, which only grew stronger over time. She loved preparing a variety of dishes and often brought her homemade meals to work for her husband, David, who always appreciated her efforts. Nicole was very close to her mother and called her every day. In early 2006, she was excited about her upcoming 33rd birthday. However, just 2 days before her birthday, she unexpectedly missed an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting in nearby Renton, surprising everyone. That night, David returned home late from work and went straight to bed, thinking Nicole would still be home. However, the next morning, he discovered that she had left, and he never saw her again. David tried calling Nicole to check on her, but she didn't answer his calls. He was worried that she might be upset because he hadn't spoken to her at dinner the night before and had gone to bed early from exhaustion. Despite his attempts to contact her, Nicole remained silent, which made him even more worried. He also contacted some of her friends and her mother, but no one had seen her. That evening, When David returned home, and Nicole had not returned, he became alarmed. Worried, he decided to go to the sheriff's office, but was told that there was not enough time to classify her as missing. However, David convinced the police to investigate her whereabouts, as her behavior was very unusual, and he feared that something might have happened to her. Police arrived at David's home and discovered that, in addition to Nicole, her 2003 Volkswagen Jetta was also missing. Nicole had left for work that morning, but was gone. Her mother became concerned about Nicole's disappearance, especially since she had not received any calls from her daughter all day, which worried her. After police confirmed that no one had seen Nicole since she went missing, they began searching for her that same day. The family of the Nicole booked flights to Washington, hoping for the best and wanting to assist in finding their daughter as quickly as possible. Everyone was confused because Nicole was known to be reliable and responsible. She would never have vanished or ignored calls. Even if she couldn't answer right away, she would have called back soon. As her silence continued, her parents and husband grew increasingly worried. Those involved in the search for Nicole sprang into action immediately. Nicole's mother and stepfather went straight to the police upon arriving in the city. Members of the Alcoholics Anonymous Club, who cared deeply for Nicole and wanted to support her family, also joined the search efforts. The club was significant to Nicole, as she never missed a meeting and was set to receive an award for 8 years of sobriety, which she took great pride in. There was no reason for her to leave or abandon everything. Nicole's voicemail was filled with calls from friends and family, but none of them had been able to reach her. Some were concerned that Nicole might have relapsed, despite successfully battling her addiction for years. The police were actively searching for her, searching the surrounding areas of Linwood, but they found nothing. Meanwhile, Nicole's parents took action by creating a website to gather information about Nicole. Many people responded to the family's call for help, but most of the messages were just well wishes, and the little information they received turned out to be false. The search seemed to stall until a new event changed the course of the investigation. On February 7, a local resident was jogging near a wooded area of San Francisco Park, near a small lake. He accidentally discovered a strange object under a raspberry bush. Curious, he approached and was horrified to discover the body of a girl. A nearby witness quickly called the police. The police arrived in time, and acquaintances recognized the body as Nicole's. Forensic experts later confirmed that there was no evidence of rape. After the autopsy in the laboratory, it was proven that the Nicole had received multiple injuries during the beating, but the cause of death was asphyxia. The Nicole had multiple blunt force injuries on her legs, torso, and head, indicating a brutal murder driven by personal hatred. This raised the question, who could have done this? Nicole had no known enemies. The case was changed from a disappearance to a murder investigation. The news of her death was devastating for David and parents. News of her death devastated David and her parents. Police began investigating her bank card transactions to trace her final movements. They discovered that her card was last used on January 30 in a nearby town where she had paid for gas. Police requested video footage from the gas station, suspecting that the killer may have made the purchase instead of Nicole and hoping to identify him in the footage. While police wait for surveillance camera footage, they continue to search for Nicole's car, as it may contain important information for the case. Police reviewed Nicole's identity and social connections, but still found no clues. Nicole was known as one of the friendliest members of her work group and club. She had no enemies. Instead, she was a devoted friend, a loving wife, a caring daughter, and a skilled employee who loved her pets. Nicole even turned her own struggle with alcohol into a positive by supporting others who were trying to get sober, setting an example for them. While the police were searching for the car, her relatives and friends shared information about the missing car and Nicole's situation. They publicly appealed for help, urging people to be aware of the car and avoid touching it. Flyers were distributed that stressed the importance of calling the police immediately if the car was discovered, as the car was linked to Nicole's murder. This prompted local residents to pay attention to Nicole's car. On February 21, 2006, her car was discovered parked near the university. Police quickly seized the car for forensic analysis, hoping to gather evidence to arrest the perpetrator and piece together the events surrounding the tragedy. Inside the car, they discovered a large amount of trash and various items, including books and sports equipment. Police discovered that after Nicole went missing, someone had used her ID and credit cards. Police are investigating the possibility that Nicole's car may have broken down on the way and she was picked up by a stranger and harmed, and the location of her car was unusual because Nicole was supposed to be traveling to another city. The position of the car seat suggested that it had been driven by someone much larger and taller than her. In the lab, experts meticulously measured the seat position to gather clues about a potential suspect. They found DNA evidence inside the car, including hair and a single fingerprint. Police collected DNA and checked. Several patrol officers searched the area where the car was found. They asked anyone nearby if they had seen Nicole's car or who had parked it, but this did not yield any useful information. The police discovered that the car had been parked in the lot since February 10, as an illegal parking ticket from that date was stuck to the windshield. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras available to assist in the investigation. Forensic tests showed that all traces of DNA in her car belonged to Nicole and David. The investigation yielded no new information to solve the case. By early April, there had been no progress. Nicole's parents had offered a $10,000 reward for any information that could lead to the arrest of the perpetrator. During this time, Nicole's mother, Gail, made frequent appearances on various television channels to raise awareness of the case. After a while, Nicole's family had to return to Arizona to work, but they kept in touch with the police who were handling the investigation. Nicole's father, Rod, was heartbroken and frustrated that the investigation was taking so long. Despite their efforts, the investigation continued without any breakthroughs. In September, the case was handed over to an experienced police officer. The new police quickly requested a search warrant for the house of the Nicole, which had not been done before. He aimed to find clues among her belongings, particularly on Nicole's computer. Unfortunately, the house revealed no signs of a crime, no blood or other evidence. The computer also yielded no useful information. Police continued to interview witnesses and acquaintances of Nicole. One of them was Barbara, a friend who had met Nicole at an Alcoholics Anonymous club. They had planned to meet at a coffee shop the evening Nicole went missing, but she never showed up. At first, Barbara thought Nicole was just running late. Then Barbara tried calling Nicole several times that day, but Nicole did not answer any of her calls. During this time, the police still had no clues to the case. Meanwhile, Nicole's parents, Rob and Gail, were at their home in Arizona. Their grief did not subside for a year. Feeling desperate, they decided to hire a private investigator because they were puzzled by the inconsistencies in the case. Nicole had left the house without her wedding ring, which was very unusual for someone who was so proud of her marriage and who would never willingly remove such a meaningful symbol. A private investigator began his investigation, but no leads were found. Nicole's family then increased the reward for information about the criminal to $25,000. Organizations focused on fighting crime and finding missing persons contributed an additional $1,000. The community remained tense, knowing that a dangerous criminal was still at large, the perpetrator seemingly without a motive, suggesting that he could be a madman ready to strike at any time. The police then requested a search warrant for Nicole's computer, believing it might contain clues about the criminal. In October 2009, the private investigator hired by Nicole's parents was charged with fraud. He falsely claimed to have found evidence in the case, but said he needed money to handle it. Her parents gave him more money, but then the private investigator disappeared and took on another case. As a result, his license was revoked. Nicole's parents no longer have a private investigator and no leads on the identity of the killer. In 2011, 5 years after Nicole's death, the investigation was still ongoing, but no significant updates were made. On March 21, 2012, the final suspect was arrested and revealed to be Nicole's husband, David. By this time, police had enough evidence against him. He was held in custody with bail set at $1 million. The prosecutor noted that the case had progressed significantly due to new technologies that were previously unavailable, especially in the field of forensic science. Police found that David's account of the night before Nicole's disappearance did not seem convincing. Additionally, police noted that only David and Nicole's DNA and fingerprints were found in her car. If strangers had been in the car, their fingerprints would still be there because they had not been erased. If the criminal had tried to erase the fingerprints, there would have been no fingerprints left. The driver's seat was adjusted to fit David's size, and surveillance footage from a gas station captured a person resembling him. After Nicole went missing, he used her cell phone to make multiple calls from various locations around the city. Police believed he was trying to throw the investigation off track. However, modern tracking technology allowed them to pinpoint the exact location of the calls, proving that Nicole could not have been there at the time because she was dead. Notably, both Nicole's and her husband's phones worked in the same areas. Strangulation, the method of murder, usually indicates a personal connection between the killer and the victim. Evidence found at the crime scene indicated that the killer was someone close to Nicole. This is consistent with the fact that she was not sexually assaulted. The medical examiner determined Nicole's time of death. It was found that she was killed at night or early in the morning while still in bed. Her limbs were clean, with no signs of struggle. Forensic experts determined the time of death by examining Nicole's stomach contents. They found that the food Nicole had eaten the night before was still undigested, suggesting that she had been murdered before she got up to go to work the next morning. Although they appeared to be a loving couple, it was clear that this was just a cover, and there were multiple reasons behind the crime. At the time, the family was facing serious financial difficulties. David is quite the party animal. He enjoys drinking and smoking marijuana, which puts a dent in the family budget. Nicole spent a lot of time and effort dealing with her addiction and had been trying to stay sober for years. David was jealous of his wife's strength. He also had affairs, and during the investigation, it was discovered that he had had at least 4 affairs. His lifestyle meant that he often pressured his wife into having sex. He even tried to drug her at a club to convince her, but she refused. This made him angry. He often met women at clubs, which led to sexual encounters. Just days after Nicole went missing, he began seeking new relationships. By the time he was arrested, David had remarried and had a child. This was especially painful for Nicole's parents, as their daughter had always wanted children, but David had no interest in that. Furthermore, David quickly began collecting documents to claim Nicole's life insurance. After gathering all the information, David was called in for questioning. At the police station, he denied any involvement in the murder. When asked to take a lie detector test, he agreed, but the results showed that he had lied. He was eventually arrested and charged with murder, but David firmly denied any involvement in the crime. The trial started in September 2013, 7 years after Nicole passed away. Her family and friends gathered in the courthouse, hoping for justice. The defense lawyer for the David argued that Nicole's death was linked to her relapsed alcohol addiction and possibly a new addiction to prescription drugs. He pointed to an empty pill bottle found during a search of the bathroom as evidence of this. And the defense insisted that all the evidence against David was circumstantial and that the case was based on speculation. Nicole's parents testified in court that David did not participate in the search efforts, did not help distribute flyers, and only pretended to be upset. Nicole's mother explained that the medication in question was a prescription painkiller prescribed to her daughter to treat severe abdominal pain caused by her endometriosis, which had significantly improved her condition. Prosecutors were unable to prove intentional conduct, so David Pitts was charged with second-degree murder. David was sentenced to 18 years and 4 months in prison, the maximum sentence under state law. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Samia Shahid. Chaudhry Mohammad Shahid and Mitiyaz Shahid left their small village of Pandori in the Jhelum district of Punjab, Pakistan, in the mid-1980s to escape poverty and seek a better life. They immigrated to the UK, and in November 1987, their first child, Samia, was born in Bradford, West Yorkshire. A few years later, they welcomed their second child, a daughter named Mada. Shahid started a car rental business, which eventually grew to specialize in luxury vehicles, including limousines. As the business prospered, he helped 2 of his brothers and their families relocate from Pakistan to the UK. The Shahid family was well known and successful in Bradford, recognized for their wealth and influence. Shahid's brothers started and grew their businesses successfully. By the early 2000s, one brother owned a seafood shop chain, while the other ran a flower delivery and floristry business. Sisters Samia and Mada were born and raised in England, growing up in an interference of European and Pakistani cultures. However, their family strictly adheres to the traditions and laws of their homeland Pakistan. This created a sharp contrast between the liberal English lifestyle and the rigid rules imposed by their family. For instance, the girls were not permitted to drive, and their father closely monitored all their activities and interactions. The eldest daughter, Samia, was Shahid's pride and is considered Daddy's favorite daughter. He pampered her, buying her expensive clothes, jewelry, and let her study at the most prestigious university. She took great care of her appearance, using high-end cosmetics, go to beauty salons, and spend a lot of money there. Although she worked part-time at a post office, her lifestyle was primarily funded by her father, who fulfilled all her wishes. Secretly, Samia would sometimes rent a car and drive herself, as she loved driving and felt confident behind the wheel. She couldn't understand why Pakistani traditions restricted women from driving. Independent and strong-willed, she valued her freedom, but still made an effort to follow her parents' wishes and avoid upsetting them. Samia had many friends from university in England and stayed in touch with them. She was known for being bright, kind, and cheerful. Despite leading a life full of love and abundance, and seemingly having everything she could want, but she lacked the freedom to make her own decisions. She always acts according to the opinions of her parents and elder members of the family. Above all, she feared disappointing her father, whom she deeply admired. Yet, the strict rules, fears, and prohibitions in her life meant she could never truly be honest with her family. In 2012, Samia's parents decided it was time for she to marry, start a family, and have children. They insisted she travel to Pakistan to enter into a marriage that followed their cultural traditions. They chose her cousin, Shakil, as their son-in-law, a man she barely knew. Marriages between relatives and arranged unions are common in their culture. Samia had always known her parents would eventually select a husband for her, presenting it as a decision she could not refuse. She had resigned herself to this inevitability, but her father's choice left her deeply shocked. Samia found Shakil repulsive and could not imagine marrying him. To make matters worse, he had recently been released from prison after serving time for killing someone in a land dispute. Although Samia had interacted with him occasionally during childhood and had seen him as a brother figure, the idea of him as her husband was unthinkable. Her parents, who were also cousins in an arranged marriage, had fallen in love and built a happy life together. They believed the same would happen for Samia and Shakil, assuming love would grow over time. Despite her strong aversion to the match, Samia felt she couldn't defy her father and understood how much this marriage meant to her family. Her mother and younger sister Mata later asserted that no one forced her into the marriage. They thought that with her stubborn personality, they could not force her either physically or emotionally. According to them, she married willingly and of her own choice. In early February 2012, the decision about her upcoming wedding was finalized during a family meeting. In the weeks that followed, her parents, along with her aunt and uncle, who were also her future in-laws, took her shopping. She was able to choose anything she wanted: costly outfits, jewelry, accessories, cosmetics, and more. And they covered all the expenses. Outwardly, she feigned excitement of wedding preparations, but inwardly, she felt trapped. She already knew this marriage would not bring her happiness, but would instead feel like a punishment. Her true feelings could only be shared with her friends, not her family. At home, she had to maintain the appearance of joy, actively in discussing the wedding details, and prepare herself for her relocation to Pakistan. On February 20, 2012, Samia boarded a plane. She texted a close friend, telling her that she was about to fly thousands of miles to make the biggest mistake of her life, but she had no other choice. Later, she sent more messages, admitting that the very sight of the groom made her feel sick and that being near him was unbearable. On February 27th, Samia and Shakil had a grand wedding at Pandori, attended by around 1,000 guests. The wedding lasted 4 days, and as a wedding gift, Samia's parents gave she and Shakil a luxurious 2-story house located. However, Samia quickly realized that this beautiful house would feel like a prison, where she would be forced to live with a man she did not love. After returning to the United Kingdom, married life brought Samia no happiness. She still despised her husband, Shakil, and knew she could never love him. 4 months later, in mid-June 2012, she went back to her hometown of Bradford to handle some matters and assist Shakil with his immigration paperwork to apply for British citizenship. She planned to apply for a spousal visa for Shakil, but she postponed it to enjoy the feeling of freedom and have some time away from a husband she did not love. When Samia began processing the documents, she discovered that their wedding ceremony, conducted in full accordance with Sharia law, was only considered a marriage contract between Muslims and held no legal validity in the United Kingdom. To make the marriage legally recognized, it was necessary to follow European legal procedures, such as having a civil ceremony and obtaining an official marriage certificate. After returning from Pakistan, Samia's friends noticed significant changes in her personality and behavior. She seemed sad, her eyes were dull, and she was no longer the cheerful, sociable person they knew. It was clear she felt deep resentment toward her parents. Any discussion about her husband or married life made her uncomfortable and angry. The root of the problem was Shakil's extreme jealousy. Even from another country, he tormented Samia by constantly calling her and demanding video chats at any time. This allowed him to monitor her whereabouts, activities, and the people she was with. His behavior was not only a way to control her, but also a demonstration of his dominance and authority over her. In early August of that year, during a phone call with a close friend, Samia admitted that she was at her breaking point. She felt completely drained, had lost all joy and hope for happiness or a bright future, and no longer wanted to live. She expressed deep hatred for Shakil, saying she never wanted to see him again. However, she couldn't share these feelings with her family because they were busy bragging to everyone about the lavish wedding they had prepared for her. In early September, unable to resolve issues related to the marriage visa, Samia was forced to return to Pakistan to live with the husband she disliked, Shakil. She wrote frequently to friends, describing her misery, her distaste for her marriage, and her feeling of being trapped with no way out. This lasted for a few months, but then she started complaining less, and her mood gradually changed. During her next visit to the United Kingdom, the reason for this change became clear. Samia had met a young man online named Syed Mukhtar Kazim, a British citizen of Pakistani descent like herself. Syed was born and raised in London, but had been living and working in the United Arab Emirates for several years. The two began corresponding and quickly developed feelings for each other. They secretly meet, and in October 2013, they saw each other in person for the first time. Samia immediately realized that Syed was the man she wanted to spend her life with. He was kind, caring, attentive, and treated her with love and respect. They have many interests in common, but also understand the dangers in their relationship. Despite this, they felt that life only had meaning when they were together. Samia shared her situation with her beloved Syed and expressed her willingness to end her marriage to start a new life with him. However, she could not get a divorce in a British court because under local law, she was not recognized as married. In the spring of 2014, Samia decided to confront Shakil and asked him for a divorce. He refused rudely, declaring that she would remain his until the end of her life. During another visit to the United Kingdom to see her parents, Samia secretly reached out to a local Islamic Sharia council, explaining that she had been forced into the marriage, which was grounds for annulment. She also converted from Sunni Islam to Shiite Islam, the religion Syed now practices. When the cleric from the council contacted Shakil to hear his perspective on their marriage, he once again refused to cooperate, angrily declaring that he would not consent to a divorce. Afterward, the Islamic Sharia Council of the United Kingdom annulled Samia's marriage, acknowledging that she had been forced into it due to family pressure. Her family was unaware that she had divorced Shakil and was planning to remarry, this time to the man she truly loved, Syed. In September 2014, Samia secretly married Syed. Unlike the previous marriage, this marriage was legally recognized, and they also received a marriage certificate to confirm its legality. The cleric who approved the annulment of her first marriage was also the one who presided over the nikah ceremony. Only a few close friends attended the intimate wedding. Samia and Syed was overjoyed. Samia confided in her friends that she felt like a princess in a fairy tale and could hardly believe her happiness was real. Sadly, this happy moment turned out to be the beginning of a nightmare and eventually led to exile. When her ex-husband, Shakil, demanded that she return to Pakistan, she informed him that she was no longer his wife and presented her new marriage certificate. Enraged, Shakil immediately contacted Samia's father, igniting a major family scandal. Her family tried to pressure her into returning to he, even resorting to threats, but she refused. This thing led to dire consequences. A few weeks later, while shopping with her younger sister, Samia was brutally attacked on the street. Her sister was left unharmed, but she was severely beaten with metal bars and narrowly avoided having her legs broken. Although police took her statement, but the identity of the attackers remained unknown, and the case was soon closed. At this time, Syed had to travel to Dubai for work, leaving his wife, Samia, in the United Kingdom, where she was waiting for a visa to join him. The waiting period was agonizing for her, filled with threats, conflicts with her relatives, and fears for her safety. Her parents tried to prove that her divorce from Shakil was valid, and even confronted the cleric who had officiated her marriage to Syed. Samia's mother was especially enraged, hurling insults at her daughter, accusing her of disgracing the family, and warning that she would face severe consequences. In the spring of 2015, Samia finally received her visa and was able to join Syed in Dubai. For her, it felt like an escape, as she feared her family would do everything in their power to prevent her from leaving and force her to return to Pakistan. To protect herself, she entrusted her passport to friends, who also purchased her plane ticket and accompanied her to the airport to ensure her safe departure. A new chapter of Samia's life began. The following year was the happiest of her life. She lives with Syed, the man she loves, who always cherishes and treats her with care. For the first time, she could drive a car, something her parents and former husband Shaquille would never have allowed. In photos she shared on social media, she appeared radiant, confident, and more beautiful than ever. It was clear she was living the life she had always dreamed of. She hoped to become a mother soon, but unfortunately, that dream was not realized. Despite this, she and Syed remained optimistic about the future, planning their life together, unaware that her family had decided against her. Shortly after Samia left, her parents filed a missing persons report with the police, which they later attempted to reclassify as an abduction, accusing Syed of kidnapping her. Meanwhile, Shaquille's family began plotting ways to force she to return. They realized that threatening her was no longer effective, but they still believed they could exploit her emotions and compassion to manipulate her. In June 2016, Samia received devastating news. Her aunt, Shaquille's mother, had passed away. Heartbroken, Samia considered traveling to Pakistan for the funeral, but knew it could be dangerous. Many relatives still resent her for divorcing Shaquille and remarrying Syed. Her actions were seen as treacherous and shameful. A week after the funeral, her mother called again with more distressing news. Her father's health had sharply declined. He was diabetic, and his condition had become critical. Samia feared that if he passed away, she could never forgive herself for not visiting him. Despite her own worries and Syed's dissuasion, she decides to go to Pakistan. Concerned for her safety, she promised her husband to stay in regular contact. On July 14, 2016, Samia arrived in Pakistan and stayed at a close friend's house. She left her passport and return ticket to Dubai with her friend, expressing her fear and insecurity and asking her friend to pray for her safe return to Syed. The first few days were relatively calm. She kept Syed and friend informed about her activities. She visited her aunt's grave with family and met several relatives. Her return flight to Dubai was scheduled for July 21. However, on July 20, Samia abruptly stopped all communication. On July 20, 2016, a heartbreaking incident occurred when Shahid contacted the police to report the death of his daughter, Samia. Upon arriving at the house where Samia had lived with Shaquille, police found her lifeless body at the bottom of the stairs. Sadly, it was too late to save her. They found bruises on her body, which her parents attributed to her falling down the stairs. A small amount of pink foam was flowing from her mouth. Shahid speculated that she might have had a heart condition, causing her to fall and tumble down the stairs. Since no one was home at the time, she did not receive immediate help and passed away. When questioned about Shaquille, Shahid explained that he was away on business. The police found no evidence of foul play at the scene and opted not to open a criminal investigation. An autopsy conducted the same day revealed no signs of violence, concluding that her death was due to natural causes. Samia was buried just a few hours after her death. Her sudden departure was not considered suspicious and was not investigated by the authorities, but it had a devastating impact on Syed. When Syed learned of his wife's, Samia's, sudden death from a heart attack, he was in shock and disbelief. According to media reports, she chose to end her life due to depression because she could not have children. However, her family rejected this version. They claimed that she passed out, then fell down the stairs and broke her neck. The investigation revealed bitter truths. Syed quickly flew to Pakistan on the earliest available flight and went directly to the police station, alleging that Samia had been killed by her relatives and Shaquille. He detailed the forced marriage she had endured, her subsequent escape, and the threats she had received from her family. This testimony completely changed the development of the case, forcing the authorities to determine this was a criminal act. However, by this time, Samia had already been buried, and the official report still stated she had died of natural causes. Determined to seek justice, Syed turned to European law enforcement and the media, as Samia was a British citizen, to push for further investigation. Samia's father, Shahid, initially agreed to an interview, attempting to depict Syed as a fraud and extortionist. However, When Syed presented their marriage certificate, a medical report, and post-mortem photos of Samia, authorities launched an investigation. The report revealed bruises on Samia's neck and legs, along with traces of male seminal fluid, suggesting she had been in an intimate encounter shortly before her death. But with whom, given that Shakil allegedly wasn't home that day? Syed held a press conference, presenting extensive evidence, including text, voice, and video messages from Samia, where she repeatedly expressed fear for her life. It is believed that the police may have taken bribes, leading to the immediate arrest of Shahid and Shakil. Investigations revealed that they never intended to let Samia's return to Dubai. They forced her to go to the house given to her as a wedding gift, where they searched for her passport and tickets, which she had given to a friend to keep. In a fit of rage, Shakil physically restrained her. When she tried to escape, they caught up with her on the stairs. Shakil strangled her with her scarf, while Shahid held her legs, ensuring she had no chance to survive. Shakil later confessed to this crime at the police station, although Shahid denied any involvement in the killing of his own daughter. In addition to Shahid and Shakil, Samia's uncle, who received a fake report before the autopsy, and the police chief in charge of the initial investigation have both been arrested. In court, Shakil retracted his confession, claiming it was made under coercion. He spent just over 2 years in prison before being released on bail in September 2018. In 2019, he remarried and again tried to move to the UK, but still without success. Samia's father, Shahid, was imprisoned from July to December 2016 and later released on bail. He died in January 2018 at the age of 52 due to deteriorating health. Before his death, he maintained his innocence and denied any involvement in his daughter's death. Samia's uncle and the commissioner were also released in the fall of 2016 without facing any penalties. Shortly afterwards, arrest warrants were issued in Pakistan for Samia's mother and younger sister, but they quickly returned to Bradford. Her younger sister, Mata, later gave a detailed interview, which accused her and Syed of being the cause of their family's breakdown, attempting to tarnish their reputations.